when I'm composing, it's almost like a Sudoku puzzle. I gotta solve these harmonic puzzles and get
beyond the start. But when you talk about the key change, when you're going to the bad key change, the accidentals to move towards
modulation.
Like the only thing I'm interested in is their modulations. I know like what all their dumb ideas are and their stupid phrases are. A good critical race theory, that's a good word, critical race theorist versus a bad critical race theorist is just better at the modulation. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
They're better at the little incremental. And he just showed here that maybe from his musical school thing across this whole entire 44 minutes, how to slowly modulate and jump categories and associate, make bad associations, and make sure to blend stuff together or separate stuff out when convenient to hold up his abstract. All right, this is Chris, and I'm here with a friend. This is James M. Dumas. Jimmy Dumas. This is my friend who is a composer. James does a bunch of work with, what are the programs you use?
Well, I've been using StaffPad lately. I love it. If I could be a sponsor for it, I would. It's a great program.
You should learn how to play the real piano at some point, though.
Yeah. No, I do, but I fear that my hands are getting old on me.
Yeah. Well, so he took a bunch of composition, was a composition major up at the University of Utah, knows a bunch of people at the University of Utah. You're going to be doing something up at the University of Utah this summer.
Yes, July. I've completed a string quartet. It's a 4-work movement. It's actually dedicated to Roger Scruton and my wife and daughters.
But more Roger Scruton, that's who he loves more.
Well, this is interesting with this music theory thing happening, because what Roger Scruton did, all he did was say it's okay to think the abstract arts are, not the greatest, this great replacement for everything that came before. And even though there's genius behind it, there's a lot of mediocrity.
What are you talking about? The only art that is good is abstract art, and you're wrong.
Yeah, well, it's weird because my love of Picasso and my love of Schoenberg, there's a lot of interesting things there, but I don't think that it was meant to be the replacement. And the way it's weird because it goes along with atheism kind of being the new replacement for religion in a lot of minds, and so there's a lot of mixed feelings there.
It's the new better way. It's the new deconstructed way of the world. I'm having a tough time here with myself.
Yeah, and then when I saw Scruton's video, Why Beauty Matters, and it was based on a book he wrote called Beauty, and he's basically cherishing Western culture, art, architecture, music, everything. And then all of a sudden I get inspired by that and say, okay, I'm not going to go down the atonal path. I focus on tonality and counterpoint. And now all of a sudden I'm starting to see these videos coming out.
These videos? What video?
Well, like we're going to talk about.
So we're going to be talking
where
about
basically it's not just hating on Western culture. I mean, it is, but like it's from themselves. It's the weirdest thing.
So James found out a while back, probably because I showed it to him, although he's well aware of these types of new cynical theories, that he's a great big white supremacist. He's a white supremacist in the academic sense that he likes 4-part, what do you call it, a counterpoint?
Yeah, counterpoint. I like classical forms. Prokofiev said, all I need is sonata form, and I'm kind of with him. It's a magical musical form. It's amazing.
That sounds like a superiority thing, and it's a superiority that comes from white, aka white supremacy.
Well, the video that we're going to go over, I will say he talks about Beethoven, Bach, and Mozart a lot, and he never talks about them being the white supremacists. He then at the very end says there was this guy named Schenker who said that their music was superior to all music, but he was also a German nationalist pre-Hitler, so it's racist.
Therefore, we all fall under the Schenker view of it. So we have the setup right like this. James and I were going to do it from a distance, but he hasn't ever done this before. So he wanted to come try to get some help in person. Maybe next time he'll be on his own. But we've got the two different things set up because we couldn't figure out how to get all the earphones coming into the same computer. So we've got the two different computers going. But we're going to be mostly looking at another video anyway as we talk about it. Hopefully you're able to hear us well on this one mic. Let's just get right into it. Let's find out. Let's get nitty gritty on why Adam Neely believes that you, sir, are a white supremacist.
No, I'm actually very glad you're here because every time I watch these videos, I think, okay, Chris knows a lot about the critical theory behind this element. And I don't know, but you're going to be able to pinpoint, why he thinks that, where he learned that.
Well, I think there's always like a kind of how we played that thing out of saying there's this music, some people view this music as supreme, and those people who view it as supreme are white people, therefore white supremacy. So they play this game to get it to this word that people typically view as a word that goes along with KKK members and that sort of thing. But they know that they're doing that naming, that double meaning thing to try to drive irritation. They want to irritate you into that association.
When it comes to the word superior throughout music history, a lot of the theorists that came after are analyzing Bach, Beethoven, and Mozart.
They're the ones calling it superior, but those were white people too, so it's still white superior.
That's true from their angle, but all they were really doing, even if they were real racists, and it was all with a racist purpose, they were still trying to figure out the most complex ways that Bach used counterpoint.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll get into it. Let's just go right along with this big galaxy brain thing. I like to put the stuff on a bit quicker speed. Although if some people are listening to me on the quicker speed, that makes it all quicker speed. Although this might not work in quicker speed if we got music going on.
Yeah, maybe we should just do it normal.
So if you're online and you see the phrase music theory, try replacing it with the phrase.
So this is Adam Neely. He's a pretty good music theorist, does pretty good videos on the YouTubes. What do you think about his videos?
I've always liked most of his videos that I've seen. When I watched this one, I agreed with many things, but didn't like how they jumped, as you'll see.
Okay.
Phrase, the harmonic style of 18th century European musicians, and see if it still makes sense in context.
Okay, so right here, he says that, and when I first watched that, I'm like, we're studying that angle because of something that happened that was special during the Enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of weird to me that he's not putting into context that when we say music theory, we're not really necessarily talking just about this, because he doesn't go into the fundamentals, the very basics. So he's going to talk about a style here.
Yeah.
And I don't understand.
And I like how he jumps right to an Asian person, because we all know all the Asian people are killing it in the style nowadays.
He picks one of Mozart's funnest little sonatas.
Yeah.
And it's actually a really fun sonata to analyze for the form. Has a nice false recapitulation.
Oh, you're a nerd. Just kidding. Keep going with that stuff. That's why you're here.
Here is an article that claims to explain the genius of Lady Gaga using the harmonic style of 18th century European musicians.
She's the tritone?
Yeah, so
that's the devil's tone.
What's funny is there's a fundamental. A tritone can exist in every kind of music, from atonal to even microtonal music.
Yeah, it's some of this stuff is, they're mad that the white people systematized it, but that systematization can be used to evaluate any culture's music. It's just kind of systematizing the tones that are to be able to.
Yeah, he doesn't go into the physics very well of this. He doesn't talk about even or well temperament at all during this whole thing. That was a discovery by man, and defining A as 440 is like discovering leap years in the calendar. You know what I mean?
But it's white supremacy. But this is part of the deal with all those theories, is that they'll even say discovering leap year, is a white supremacist thing. They'll even say that like any sort of discovery that viewing it from this
It's
European
the Julian calendar, right?
Yeah, this European centric view of stuff is white supremacy. Even how we view physics. There was a whole article. I should pull up the thing. I'll pull it up. But there was a whole article today that they're trying to move decolonization into physics, and there's like a $500,000 grant to start trying to decolonize physics. But there's a lot about music that is sort of like physics. It's sort of like understanding physics. I don't know.
Oh, the deep rootedness of theory. It goes all the way back. He's going to mention Pythagoras later. You learn about him in college, but they don't really tell you how much of it is myth and legend versus that. We'll get into that, but
Pythagoras was a cultist. We can't cancel Pythagoras.
And Socrates.
The article then goes on to highlight her song Bad Romance's use of the raised leading tone in a minor key, which was very popular in 18th century Europe. Very cool. This is a class.
I think that's also kind of
Well,
like
he
over
says-
evaluating her music.
He says that like, oh, it was very popular to have a leading tone go to the tonic, and then okay, that's very popular in all tonal music.
If you start messing around with music yourself without even getting into any sort of theory, you might accidentally do that.
You might. Well, that's how we kind of discovered the leading tone.
Yeah.
Remember how you said to me, modes always confused you? Well, it's because the major scale was a discovery that took centuries. There's a Leonard Bernstein video where he describes it, right? But each note was discovered. Then once we found the major scale, it was like, oh,
Yeah.
that leading tone and that dominant to tonic relationship. That's something that when they discovered it, they were like, that's cool.
Yeah, that makes a cool sound. But even nowadays, because it's so interwoven into our brains and cultures, our white Western culture, but even though it's in all sorts of cultures all over the world, that's why some of this pop music is able to travel across cultures so well. Is if you're somebody who's just kind of grew up on Western pop culture and you get a guitar, you have no guitar lessons or something like that, and you just start fiddling with tones, you start trying to make melodies, you'd probably do that. You'd probably do a leading tone into the tonic.
Oh yeah, they did that all the time in the Renaissance before they discovered actual tonality in Middle Ages. They would always make a half step. If you were in the D Dorian, you would always do like a C sharp to the D to make that half step, and so you'll hear a lot of their music. It's not necessarily D minor though. It is a D Dorian scale.
Yeah.
And it sounds different.
Yeah. So, but the thing with all that is some level of the person who stops and says, wait, why does that sound good? That person who tries to categorize stuff is somehow a naughty, bad person.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe they wouldn't have been if they were of color.
Well, and there's been thousands of them that date all the way back to
and I'm sure some of them are of color too. I'm sure there's been plenty of people who work in figuring out tones and tonalities and ideas, and especially in Indian music.
Here's the thing before we continue that frustrates me is we got to talk about it as a purely Christian thing.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately for the atheists, they have to acknowledge one, that I learned anyway in music history class from Dr. Rourke that harmony was discovered in the Middle Ages by monks through Gregorian chant echoing off the walls of the huge cathedrals. Now, I have looked everywhere, and even like online and Google, trying to find. Dr. Rourke said that there were only 40 pieces of Greek and Roman music that were left behind after the destruction of a lot of the pagan arts. So, out of those 40, they found no harmony. They don't know if the Greeks or Romans discovered harmony, but it doesn't look like it. It always looked like they mimicked the voice with their instrument, maybe with a little bit of embellishment, right? And so I really thought about it. I'm like, okay, so harmony was discovered in these giant cathedrals, right? And by monks. These are people that are memorizing the Bible, and they're masters of writing the Bible down beautifully, And so it's a very Christian thing that it starts, and music started linearly, and then we discovered where the harmonies met vertically, right? And that's when we got obsessed with harmony. But it wasn't until the Middle Ages, right? And he doesn't discuss that. And I don't know if we can approach it without saying how rooted in Christianity.
There's no way to start playing with harmonies and those ideas without knowing where the roots of the people who discovered it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another thing is he leaves out Martin Luther, who Bach was obsessed with, who wrote a lot of music and believed personally that worship needed to be within music. Music was integral to the church. And so the development of counterpoint itself is a very Christian thing. I'm actually surprised.
Oh, you're such a supremacist, man.
Huh?
Your supremacy it's hurting me.
Oh, I'm surprised that he doesn't just go full attack about how Christian it is.
Yeah, you could use that. You like that's one of the things. Like you start getting the stuff. If you're somebody who really knows the things, you even start seeing like the better angles of bullshit they could have taken. You know what I mean? Like I could have gone after the Christian angle of it. And
Can take all about the harmonic style of 18th century European musicians, and the way that you can tell is
I love
by
how he
looking-
just casually makes it seem like harmonic is just this thing we've always known. Like I just explained, it took us a long time to discover it.
That's the postmodern thing, is trying to make everything like level out the playing field and make everything just kind of another thing. It's all relative, whatever.
at the course catalog, which has a lot of tonal harmony in it, which was very popular in 18th century Europe. This is a thread on the electronic music producer Deadmau5's subreddit, which asks, does Joel use the harmonic style of 18th century European musicians?
No, come on.
I mean, here's the funny thing. If you don't know anything about music and you don't have any talent, you can read these 18th century harmonic styles of things and write pretty decent songs people like. So I don't understand the problem.
Well, the problem is that it's very centric of the thing. But I hate to tell you, Adam Neely, you're using very elitist white theories to evaluate this. This is itself an elitist, college level, mostly white people type theory. There's a like Crenshaw and whatever are black, but the entire thing has mostly been pushed into the world to evaluate things like this. We could just say it's just another elitist white European or American theory.
Well, no, he doesn't use the same vocabulary that Mozart did, and he is very clear in interviews that he uses a different skill set.
Do you self-identify as a tech guy or as a musical artist at this point?
I think I'm more tech than, Mozart or whatever the hell.
What about
I like that
need
guy
help?
though.
Yeah, well, there's all sorts
I mean-
of music people, but I mean, that tech got put together using Mozart, so
Well,
it
he
doesn't matter.
says- He says so nonchalantly, he doesn't use the musical set of Mozart.
He's being a
playing one of
humble
the
guy
simplest
about it, yeah.
pieces. Mozart wrote 626 or 636 pieces.
But the tonality of that tech, the people who created that tech, the tonality of the tech creators, those
Yeah.
guys used 18th century musical theory.
No, I get that, but everyone does, like, because it's tonality. He's not making a distinction here. See, what happened was when tonality was complete, and when Bach wrote the Well-Tempered Clavier, and he did 2 books, by the way, all the keys, showing how you can use all the keys, all 12, majors and minors, and that's like tonality is complete.
Yeah.
And so now here's the thing. We talk about it in music school. You have these music theory teachers, but nobody admits it. The world embraced tonality. Tonality won.
Yeah.
Overall, people like tonality.
Yeah.
Understanding how this progression fits in with the harmonic style of 18th century European musicians. How many of you guys know the harmonic style of 18th century European musicians? Did the Beatles know much about the harmonic style of 18th century European
Well, that's
musicians?
what's funny is they were being taught by George Martin, who was a master of the harmonic style of the 18th century of European musicians.
This is a pretty good just to step outside it for me, because one of the things that I go around complaining is that there's all these sorts of people who are using these postmodern theories or cynical theories or critical race theories, and they don't know where it's trickled down from. That's a
Yeah.
pretty good example of like the exact same thing. Yes, the Beatles were using
Well, what's funny
music
is
theory, and no, they didn't have to be fully perfectly taught in music theory.
he's going to hold up a book in a bit. It's going to be a fundamental theory book. And he's going to act like that whole book that's thick is just about this. And it's not. I guarantee the first couple of chapters are the fundamentals, the hardest things to understand, in my opinion, well, to teach. I've had a hard time teaching just intervals. What are intervals? Why they work? but it probably has that. And then it goes into Roman numeral analysis and stuff and 4-part writing. I mean, I'm sure it has all of that, but there's going to be a part about 20th century. And what's funny is in my theory book back in 2005, there was a section of Beatles music. There was Blackbird.
Yeah, Beatles are one of the, I mean, I learned music theory from the Beatles. And if the Beatles didn't know music theory, I guess I don't know music theory, but part of the reasons I know music, started learning a bunch of music theory, is the Beatles had such a good ranging catalog of pop music that it was good to, if you learned all the Beatles songs, you learned a ton of different ideas of like circle of fifths or leading tone from a seventh,
You know, the Beatles were very talented, very gifted, John and Paul especially.
But we all know George R. R. Martin.
Yeah. But see, like what happened with the
not
you know,
George
with
R.
the
R.
Beatles,
Martin. George R. R. Martin is the.
They got famous and an education at the same time.
Yeah.
So like George Martin would come in.
That's why they're so good to learn them, because like from the beginning to the end, you get to watch stuff grow from very simplistic to much more complex.
Exactly. But see, when it says, did the Beatles know much about it at the time? No.
Mm-mm.
Now, probably. I think
if they got teaching from Martin, they got training in it.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And you know, George Martin worked with them all after they broke up on many albums too.
Yeah.
You know,
so crazy that dude's still alive.
No, he passed away.
Did he? When?
George Martin passed away in 2020.
Did he?
Maybe
it was just barely if it was, because I didn't even hear about it.
Let me double check. I bet if I type it in, it's going to suggest George R. R. Martin.
Yeah. I thought he's still around. Oh, yeah, he died in 2016. I didn't even know that.
Oh, okay,
I saw something very recently, like a video of him talking with his daughter his granddaughter, or probably great-granddaughter, about music, and it was all cutesy and stuff, and it looked like it was just filmed yesterday or something.
Well, so that's the thing. One of the most famous stories I've heard was Paul McCartney was like, I really like what this sounds like. And George Martin was like, oh, that's Bach. It's a Bach invention. And he's like, I'm trying to write a thing. It was Blackbird, and Blackbird is based off of kind of a Bach invention, the style, right? Well, okay. Well, Paul McCartney was obsessed with that, and Blackbird's one of the greatest songs ever written. So why is Adam Neely saying that's bad?
Because they're all white.
Etc., etc. You get the point. We see this all the time in popular media. We've been trained to see the two of them as the same thing, even though the analytical models.
We've been trained like it's a conspiracy theory. We've been trained.
Oh, yeah.
The music theory that might help in understanding the music of Beethoven might not help in understanding rock music or country or R&B or electronic dance.
Yes, it does. Sorry.
Well, it's funny because.
Yes, it does. There's just no.
When he says that, you know, first of all, to analyze country music, it's usually the 1, 4, and 5 chords anyway. R&B may be less about the chords, you know, in general. I mean, I just did an arrangement of flute and harp for a friend, and she wanted 3 songs. The first song was that song by that redhead guy. What's his name?
Oh, Edward Sheeran,
Ed Sheeran, that We Were Falling in Love song. And then she wanted me to do Single Ladies. And I'm listening to Single Ladies. I'm listening to, is this just 1 chord? It is. And I messaged her and I said, am I wrong about this? Is Single Ladies just 1 chord? She's like, yeah, it is. And I'm like, I kind of hear like these chromatic things going on in the background, but it doesn't form a chord. So I put it, it sounded really neat actually. And actually,
you're still evaluating it.
But that's the thing is, I actually came to really like and appreciate that song. There's some neat stuff going on.
But through evaluating it through music theory.
Oh, that's true.
You know what I mean? Like, there's no getting out of it.
Well, what am I supposed to do when people ask me to make an arrangement for them? I have to listen and evaluate.
Dance music or any of the styles of music.
One single chord relies on this music theory.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like, if you really want to get super white supremacy on it, you know, you'd have to define a chord technically as 4 separate notes. So you can't even call a C major chord with a C on top of chord. That's still a triad. If you want to get super technical.
Yeah. So but even the triad, discovering the triad was part of what he's taking a big dump on here. Just if you want to do a song holding 1 single chord in it, you've got to rely on the past people who figured out that chord exists.
Well, like you said, when you stopped it, you said, yes, it does. Because he just said, you can't use this to analyze R&B and country. It's like that. I was like, what are you talking about?
Yes, you can. So
like, in fact, for songs like
when
that,
when they break a rule, you can use the evaluation to see how that breaking of the rule is interesting.
Again, though, he's
And
going
he
to
knows
talk
this.
about
The problem is he knows this.
he's going to talk about all of these theoretical things. I think Roman numerals and stuff like that, and show these analyses in these books, and then say that it can't be used for like other musics, which is funny because we know that. And in music school, I'm like, hey, this doesn't work for Debussy. It's like, well, yeah, you have to alter things, and there's kind of new sets of rules we use for Debussy analysis.
Yeah,
Oh,
also
okay.
helps you to describe it. But this is the deal: is that his whole world relies on what he's taking a dump on here, which is the same thing. You can take a step back and criticize any one of these deconstructive theories. Your whole world relies on what you're taking a dump on.
That you, the person watching this video, are statistically more likely to listen to and make part of your life than the music of Beethoven.
Can you go back to that chart? Oh, we're only 2 minutes in. Okay. The most popular genres in U.S. Okay. None of those are atonal.
No.
Okay. So he's claiming that the tonal observations of the 19th and 18th century can't.
They all rely on the harmonic stylings of 18th century.
That's the thing, they all do. And then even if you come down to jazz is amazing, but it completely uses tonality like crazy.
Yeah. It plays, and all the rule breaking it does relies on breaking the rules of tonality to make cool sounds, you know.
I mean, I do actually, it is very sad that jazz is at the bottom.
Yeah.
Statistically more likely to listen to and make part of your life than the music of Beethoven. Let me put it this way. What most people think of as music theory actually does a pretty bad job of describing musical practice in most styles of music. Instead, this has kind of been used as a means of comparing all music from all people across.
That's not the point of it.
Yeah, the point of it is harmonies. It's figuring out melodies and harmonies.
Yeah, the point of it is there's this magical thing that happens when we stack notes.
Yeah, it might not help you figure out why certain rhythmic ideas or sounds don't.
Well,
but even there, they can kind of like,
you know, music theory,
label them out better. Yeah.
Music theory and composition are separate but together. Okay, the composer has an instinctive thing to do, and then he can learn theory to make his compositions better. That's where we're at now. Historically, we didn't always have those tools.
Yeah.
And second of all, if you wanted to be a music theory major, there's like, you got to learn this, and then you got to learn every other branch of theory, because that's what you do as a music theorist now, because there's so many different kinds of music. But there is this reliance on this center of pitches.
If you're using pitches and tonality,
physics,
and I don't know of much music that gets around that, unless it's just complete.
But even at the heart of it, we've made the most beautiful 12. The circle of fifths is beautiful when you look at it. And it gets ignored. It gets ignored and bypassed like it's this simple thing. And I'm like, the circle of fifths might be one of the greatest achievements musically, in theory. Well, that sounded stupid. Maybe edit that out.
No.
The globe to the stylistic practice of a select few musicians. These guys versus say,
right there. I saw that and I was like, those are a select few musicians, Chris. Now what you're staring at is, I mean, genius.
Don't say something supremacist, man.
I'm not, but
I like they start using these. If I watch all of them as they talk, like look at his body language there and all that stuff. They get into this thing of like, they're no big deal.
How can you casually say that? These are men who I mean, well, you're going to see how they nonchalantly say Beethoven's just whatever.
Yeah.
Oh,
sigh.
These guys. So.
And now, no, those people land squarely inside the same tradition. Come on.
But that's the thing is, nobody's saying those three aren't geniuses. Scott Joplin was obsessed with Mozart and Bach. Yeah. He considered himself a ragtime Mozart.
There's nobody who does not think Joplin was amazing, who also loves these people.
I mean, I think that Mozart and Bach would love ragtime.
It's this dichotomy, this creating this stratification, as they say it, this creation of a distance and a separation, this creation of a conflict theory is the essence of this critical race theory crap. And you're creating a division purposefully,
Well, I've told you
cynically,
this.
with a critical eye to try to bring about the contradictions and
That's
make
the
a
thing
fight
is
in it.
this isn't that old. I mean, hell, in Scott Joplin's lifetime, and I've told you this, he struggled with the fact that he liked to write music. He could read it, he could write it, and that was some of his contemporaries like, no, you're getting educated like with the white system. This isn't new.
Yeah.
And Scott Joplin was like, what is wrong with you? He had a friend who was dying of tuberculosis who begged him, oh, please write 2 rags down. And, I was looking into it. There's a lot of beautiful rag music that never got written down because at the time, the notion of educating yourself that way was seen as a way of white enslavement still. I mean, I've read these things and I thought, dang, that's kind of sad. How much music have people heard, but we can never hear again?
Yeah.
Can you spot the difference between the tonal composers on the left and the tonal composers on the right?
As he points out, they're all tonal.
That's right. The ones on the left are American. The ones on the right are German. They clearly wrote the better music.
I like how he makes the dichotomy there as American.
Yeah,
only
he's
because
trying to pull like a 1-2 switch.
Well, it's like American classical musicians were never taken serious in Europe.
There's also like a century difference there.
There is, but starting with even Sousa, he's really popular now, but in Europe at the time they would probably think, oh, those Americans and stuff. When Aaron Copland came around,
anything
and
new,
stuff,
people sneer at it.
Yeah, but for a while, classical music seemed to be this European thing.
Yeah.
And the American tradition seemed to be, I don't know, not seen or regarded as highly. I know that Thomas Jefferson met Mozart once. At least I've read about it. And these were men of the Enlightenment. Again, interesting that the Enlightenment's being attacked when he could use that Christian angle. And the Enlightenment
Well, they're all
the Enlightenment was used to expose the church, kind of,
Yeah.
That's why we study them. They clearly have the superior music. They clearly have a superior culture. They are individuals of genius who rise above the degenerate masses and their degenerate music.
Why is he playing that? That sound in the background. They're the genius. Yes, they were geniuses. What's the problem?
Because he wants to demonize you, James.
White racial frame of music theory.
Hi, my name is Phil
White racial frame.
Ewell. I am an associate professor
I am a ideological hack.
of music theory at Hunter
I just poisoned the whale there.
College here in New York City.
Dr. Ewell gave the keynote speech at the annual Society for Music Theory conference.
Our white racial frame believes that the music and music theories of white persons.
See, here's the thing, and how do I frame this? This is not about race, but he was in a position where he's a professor of music. That's a hard thing to be because you have to think of new things.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of this stuff all the way back when I was in school that actually was framed to me that some people said, the only reason we're doing this is because it's a new idea and it's a new way to make academia because we've ran out of stuff.
Exactly. So now he's making this white racial frame.
Yep.
Represent the best framework for music theory.
It's part of everything that we do, white racial framing in music. All of the materials that we use in our music theory classes, for sure, are so deeply indebted to whiteness.
In his paper, The White...
What's
Okay, why
whiteness?
He's going to talk about, I believe he's about to talk about figured bass. And they're going to ignore it as if it's not used in a lot of rock songs or songs today. But why is that whiteness?
They're creating the construct, they're creating the frame, and they might go around and get upset that occasionally there's some white supremacist types who do get into their heads about who made the best culture and that sort of stuff, and they think, well, it's the whites, which is a pretty rare random amount of people, but they're trying to extrapolate that and say that it's the entirety of our Western traditions that are the same type of white supremacist.
racial frame of music theory, Dr. Ewell says that music
Why are you making these videos, Adam Neely? Get out of there. You should be a different color. Make space.
theory can be seen as a racial ideology in which the views and ideas of white persons are held to be more significant than the views and ideas of non-whites.
Okay, so right here.
Racial ideology.
That
can be seen by you racist hacks.
now, which the views and ideas of white persons are held to be more significant. Well, here's the thing again, like I said, this was people discovering harmonies and tonal sounds, which is a pretty cool thing that we did. And no one's saying that the views and ideas of the white persons are held to be more significant than the views and ideas of non-whites. But what happened in Europe was the views and ideas became more, I don't want to say complex, because there's so much complexity in
Well,
all
they
kinds
did
of
take
music.
more time of labeling it out. So that's
Yeah.
part of the deal with it, is that they not only did they figure things out, they made it accessible to other people to see what they were doing.
Exactly. And then the world embraced it and liked it.
Like forming out systems and forming out, codes of showing like, this is how I do it, so you too can do it. I guess that's white supremacy.
I mean, in order for this statement to bring any kind of truth, you have to ignore the effect of this music on the world.
Well, there's a level of it too that's significant, that's cynical. I mean, there's a side of it is like, that's you guys who are sitting there. So one of the things that people will always point out when you like point at the schools of critical theory, and there'll be people on the actual white supremacist world who will point and say all those different professors are Jewish people. And so then they'll say, those super white supremacists will say, well, those are Jewish theories, and they'll make up this thing that this is part of like a Jewish intent to tear down Western culture or something like that. Well, those guys are ridiculous. But the second people who go and do that are the people who are trying to defend it. They're the ones who will stop and say, hey, we noticed they're all Jewish. And so if you say anything negative against them, you are also anti-Jewish. So there's two sides of the coin. There's the cynical side, and then even like the extreme racist side, which are two, each, as Jung says, each opposite becomes its other. You guys are hyper focused on what the race is of the people there. You guys are the ones sitting there doing the can be seen, just like the extreme racists are. You guys, who I also call extreme racists on the other side of it, are sitting there obsessing about skin color of who's doing what.
He's going to tie this all to Schenkerian analysis, which is it's an analysis form that was supposed to give you a shorthand of a whole giant work. And it's hard to learn, and it's really weird in a lot of ways. But what are they doing here? They're analyzing something, and they're talking about what it is. They're labeling, they're making a label of something.
Yeah, they're the ones making the construct. And then there has been times through history where the extreme opposite side made that construct as well. But you're not helping the world by redoing it, freaks.
Woo, okay. Racial ideology. That sounds like some critical race theory jargon. And as we've learned recently, that is un-American. So I don't want to talk about that too much on this channel, lest we be accused of un-American activities.
See,
so to try and figure out
right there, just grazing over again, like in the common person's mind, critical race theory is trying to get the real history out of schools when it's clearly a way to teach white kids to be guilty about
it's a hack. It's you shouldn't use it because it's a hack theory, Adam Neely. You're a hack. If this is hack, I know that you're not a hack about music, but you want to show that you have the right virtue values here, so you're going to go ahead and use this hack theory.
American music theory is not built around these American composers. We're going to focus on just the music, and we already kind of have done that. We saw how music theory in popular culture can simply just mean the harmonic style of 18th century European musicians. And there are some musical elements which are unique to that style that are not shared in other styles, which are oddly prioritized.
One thing I like to talk about, which
Oddly prioritized.
Yeah, I don't know why it's oddly.
because there's a supremacy intent under it. It's
Well,
not just because
I believe this is where they talk about figured bass.
it's not just because of certain preferences or whatnot.
because it's so funny, is figured bass.
Figured
Yeah,
bass is a system where numbers indicate intervals and chromatic alterations above bass notes. It's kind of like a 17th century shorthand, like chord symbols, a means of getting by on the gig. Musicians would read off of figured bass charts and improvise their parts, which was a practice called basso continuo, or simply continuo.
And as a cellist who's played a lot of continuo with some really good Baroque groups, figured bass is something I live and breathe. I love figured bass. I understand it intimately. When we think about having it in our music theory textbooks, are you kidding me?
Here is a music
Okay,
theory
why?
textbook. From
Why is he
17
saying, are you kidding me? He's probably going to go into it's outdated or something. I have no
25.
idea.
Johann Fuchs's Gradus ad Parnassum, which honestly does not look that much different from a textbook from 2011, Harmony and Voice Leading by Aldwer and
Yeah,
Schachter.
it's good
Nothing
stuff.
has really changed in 300 years, even though music has changed quite a lot.
See, that's the thing is right here, it was never meant to change. This was meant to be a discovery that we discover, and then you can use and build upon it. And people did.
Yeah.
Korsakov wrote a harmony textbook.
There was nobody ever saying that you had to stick to this thing forever. There were going to be people who preferred it, where it was more universally passed on to other people. But there certainly wasn't some sort of level that of like, we're keeping it because it's white. We're keeping it because it's white.
He's gonna talk about Rimsky-Korsakov here and how he thought that figured bass should be out of theory. Well, Rimsky-Korsakov was a Russian, and and they have their own awesome ways of doing things. But I would argue Rachmaninoff didn't listen to Korsakov and studied his figured bass if you listen to his piano concerto. So
the most famous harmony textbook ever written in Russia, probably. And he said, you know what? Music is so crazy these days. I'm not even going to put figured bass in here because it's kind of a waste of time. It's outdated. We don't need it.
See, that doesn't make sense.
That was 1884.
Seriously, check this out. This is what Rimsky-Korsakov,
This is what
Flight of the Bumblebee guy, wrote. In most of the existing manuals of harmony, we find rules for reading the now obsolete figured bass, but little or no practical advice for harmonizing melodies or selecting chords.
Okay, but see,
white
right
supremacy.
Well, he says little for selecting chords. Well, like again, I said music was born, linearly first. We thought of the horizontal movement before the is that right? Vertical before the horizontal. I mean, sometimes I get confused between right and left.
You said the horizontal before the vertical before.
Well, so they move in lines.
Yeah,
right.
And then you figured out the vertical.
Then we figured out the
chords
vertical
to add with it.
Well, I remember this argument between Dr. Qualia and two
Bottom.
professors at the School of Music, and they were arguing about if Bach would have known the chords. And I was like sitting there wondering why professors were, one was saying no.
All he really did was counterpoint.
Well, Bach would have.
He never jammed chords.
No, he played chords and stuff. But I mean, I think that he thought so contrapuntally that as he was learning everything, like in his lifetime, it wasn't like he was going to look at you and be like, well, I'm going to go to the tonic and the dominant and modulate here. I don't know if he would talk that way because we try to analyze Bach through our theory, but in his time through species counterpoint and the way that he learned is almost like, well, these people would say an outdated way of doing things.
And white.
140 years ago. I mean, might as well be explaining this book or this book or this book. Like,
so we're supposed to
nothing has changed.
Just crap on everything from the 19th century and before.
We don't have to perpetrate a system which is, once you actually look at it, kind of ridiculous.
Figured bass is totally useless in understanding.
There's always these points they're making. They're making just such a jump that okay, so you don't like a form of writing something. White supremacy, proof of our white supremacy.
What's he about to say? It's useless at analyzing what?
Any kind of music that isn't Western or tonal. Instead, it's a tool designed to
Okay.
understand the style of music from one kind of people.
I now
Well,
refer to
pause
it.
it again. He did say Western and tonal, and again, it was not pushed upon the world; it was accepted
and popularized because it was popular.
I mean, I hate to say it, but Japan got obsessed with classical music.
Yeah, the Asian world is crazy about it, even though they have other types of music that has more tones in it, right?
I don't think K-pop sounds like traditional Korean theory music.
We're forcing it upon them, white supremacist capitalism style. Don't you know that? K-pop is totally like
they
a
found
capitalistic fourth stage capitalism dystopia.
Yeah, they found the 3 chords that work, and they sing, and they're pretty boys, and they make a lot of money.
Yeah, but they get forced into fourth stage capitalism, where they're forced to go do these types of things. And there's a whole farm of K-pop kids who try to go and run for that, and they work 77 hours a day and something.
There's that one who killed himself. That was a sad story.
No, they do. They really do have like farms of not like farms, but people who want to go sign up for that and try to be a part of it. And they try to put them through these like intensive schools to become a K-pop star. But in any one of those cases, like anything, even though if you take their capitalist deconstructions of stuff, they're still in a free society where those people can decide to not be K-pop stars and not try to go put themselves through that.
Not yet another method that the white racial frame of music theory can police and enforce whiteness. They'll never say that.
You made that extrapolation. Yeah.
What they'll say is, oh,
They'll never say
but it's-
that. Yes, because it's your ideology, you screwball. You're trying to force your ideological words onto other people to keep your abstract, to reify. We talked about the fallacy of reification. To maintain your abstract idea of the world, you've got to force that in. You're doing the reification fallacy that was brought up in the world of ex-Mormonism this week.
It's historical, and it can help with other things. There's a reason that they're going to give for everything, for keeping things the way they are.
That's how it's
And you claim that reason is white supremacy. You claim that.
justified.
Well, yeah, all the writing has been done after, like, again, all the theory came after the music, all the writing about how supremacist it is now coming out.
But all the stuff they say about the they, it's just like conspiracy theories. You know, there's a the they of white supremacists maintaining continual.
Anyway, in the course catalog for AP music, AP harmonic style of 18th century European music.
And Adam Neely, we know that you just have to virtue signal about this crap to try to keep your place inside of a New York music scene, or you'll be ousted because nobody wants to hear from a white guy. If you're straight, less power to you.
Yeah, no kidding.
But let's say that you were enrolled in AP Spanish, and the way
Ooh, there's something I know about.
that you were taught Spanish in this course was by studying 300-year-old Spanish grammar.
Hate to break it to you, buddy. Hate to break it to you. I was reading, I was with Spanish grad school, and we had to study 300-year-old Spanish grammar. That's what we studied in school. And we had to do it because we had to learn 300-year-old Spanish poetry. If you want to read Don Quixote, guess how old Don Quixote is? And everybody's got to learn and read Don Quixote if you're going to be a Spanish. Oy.
I understand the frustration on that side, but I don't understand the connection he's making. I don't think it's the same thing, because he's talking about music theory.
Yeah, they make a category error.
Yeah, and if you want to be a complete musician, there's so much theory to learn, right? And it's not changing the way language is. The fundamentals stay the same. That's what's so funny. Everything goes back to the 12 tones that we decided of even temperament, even though there is like quarter tone scales and stuff. Mankind has decided as a whole, these 12 make the best sounds.
But the flip end of it too is like he's making this other error that he should know, and plenty well does know, that in graduate school the whole concept is to make yourself a better applied person at something.
Well,
when you're studying stuff, when you're figuring out the history of stuff, when we read El Mio Cid, which is like 1,000 years old, over 1,000 years old in Spanish grad school, we weren't studying it to try to figure out how to speak with the cholos down in Mexico City better.
Well, see, let's go on his angle too. So what he's also saying is, for example, that Shakespeare's irrelevant because he's hard to understand.
You have to learn a different way to speak and what words meant.
That English was spoken. But here's what I'll say to Adam Neely. Why is it outdated and we should throw it out? Why is that not a failure of society that everybody should be able to understand Shakespeare?
Yeah, but on top of that too, you bring about a complaint that almost all of us have about graduate school and the lofty towers, the marble towers of schools, that for sure you are a composition major. So inside of composition, there is some application stuff. If you're not in maybe that, like the world of Spanish, going to graduate school for Spanish, guess what? If we go into second language acquisition, nobody's sitting there trying to make sure that you speak Spanish better. There's not that in graduate school anywhere. There's not that in graduate school anywhere. There's meta studies of where the Spanish came from or how second language acquisition happens possibly in the mind as far as those studies go, coming through Chomsky.
I'll take back a little bit that his analysis does kind of work, but where he's just saying stuff is outdated doesn't work, because actually I would expect a professor, a doctorate of Spanish, to be able to understand Spanish all the way back to a long time ago, right? Like I knew an English professor who could understand old English that sounds not like English, right? And you'd kind of expect that out of a person who's a doctoral professor. So you would expect
you go to like some English major, you go to graduate school for English, nobody's there teaching you how to write your vlog better. Does that make sense? That's not what the point of that graduate school is. And that's kind of the same thing he's saying here. Is like, we're going to get this tonal mentality. And what if somebody just wants to be an R&B singer? Well, then you shouldn't be in graduate school unless you want to get more into like to inform your world through these things.
Again, the complaint that I keep seeing mostly is the Western attack, but it was Western acceptance of the world. But this idea that it was forced upon him or something.
It's just it's studies, it's evaluations of the recorded history of the discovery of stuff over time. And because the white Western world got there first in labeling it out, that's the real area where I think they got ahead of everybody, is labeling it out, which I think is a very ubiquitous thing. It's a thing where they put it out of saying it's an enlightenment thing. It's a thing of saying maybe there's something special about me that I can do or whatnot, but look, I'll put it out on paper so you too can do it. I'm gonna chart it out. I'm gonna chart it out for you. And nobody ever did that with some of those other oral or pass along traditions, which might be the only reason why we don't have maybe certain. And I do think there is some written down tradition in some Hindu type, like drumming type stuff. I know that for sure in that world there is. But the pass along idea, the idea of making it so it can be read and seen and done by future generations, is a concept that's enlightenment. It's very gregarious. It's very let's pass this on to the world.
It's almost like it's like everything that we've done to record everything we've done to get history as concise as we can now finally get it. It's like we just want to go back in time and the first person to pick up a pen, but don't do it.
Yeah.
No, stop, because this is going to cause so much problems in the future. Just be like Socrates. Don't write shit down.
Now, studying these archaic tenses might be interesting. It's definitely historical. The way that they spoke Spanish back then definitely has influenced the way that Spanish is spoken around the world. And I don't know if
you get a graduate degree in Spanish, you got to do it.
Know a little bit of Spanish. Maybe it might be useful for understanding Don Quixote or whatever, but is it useful?
Don Quixote is it's the central piece of Spanish literature. It's considered the first novel of all time. You have to go through Don Quixote if you want to say you have a degree in Spanish and Spanish literature.
He's talking about people that
it's not just to kind of get Don Quixote a little better.
He's talking about people who speak Spanish casually, but also
he's talking to the thing I'm saying, and he's talking as if the only reason you go to graduate school is to get applied Spanish speaking skills. But you don't go to Spanish graduate school to get applied Spanish speaking skills.
He's also talking about the way he's casually saying it. He's giving excuses for all of those people who refuse to learn theory because they're just talented or whatever, right? He's saying, why is he dismissing
you and I both know they don't have to, and they don't need to, and it might not even be that helpful to them. But if they want to go through, if they want to get better, they should.
I'll tell you right now, the greatest compliment you can get as a songwriter is when someone says your song sounds like a real song.
Yeah.
And what they're saying there is there's something about that, and usually what it is these practices that he's dismissing.
Yeah, but there's a level of it too that for sure. If I just want to go be a country singer or whatever, a country player or an R&B player, I never have to get into this. I can always kind of just remain at a level that just kind of becomes derivative of other stuff around me a little bit, and that's that. You can do that. You can just be an applied player like that. Go for that. But usually in those scenarios, if you want to become good at any sort of level, you're probably going to go take some lessons from somebody who did.
Well, and also, again, if you're playing country, are you telling me, Adam, that book of tonal harmony can't describe everything that Willie Nelson's written?
Dude, when I'm playing this, I'm learning these old-timey type flat picking songs, these bluesgrass songs, and it gets so intense with the use of the major scale. At like the difference between that and the blues stuff that I told you about is that they really are actually the blues scale stuff. Through not knowing very much of this, they figured out like a trick to just kind of always stay on the same scale. And that's why blues only really kind of ever has like this level of complexity to it. Then the same three chords get more complex in the country stuff because they really do follow the theory of changing the tones with each chord that changes. And some people will say, well, even the country music's like not that interesting, but the infinite amount of choices that you have seemingly from just changing 3 chords, 4 chords, 5 chords, but if you're really changing all of your choices each time the chord changes, it just expands stuff so much that it's almost impossible to, not impossible. I mean, you do it better than I do it by far. I'm still just trying to get better at those types of things, but changing your brain with each chord change is so expansively difficult, and it offers so many more options. And that's just a little bit of extra. That's just getting into what are all the tones of these 3 different chords.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, I love country music, a lot of it, especially Willie Nelson, Merle Haggard. But I'm still struggling as to why he keeps saying this does a bad job at explaining.
Yeah,
that's a big book, Adam.
Well, I think he's making more the point that you don't need to do this to go be an applied player. But everybody's known that since forever. Everybody knows that you can go become a music star without a second of ever seeing that book. So why? His question is, why do you have to do it through grad school?
Well, anybody who's wealthy at making music is not a professor of music.
Is it practical for having conversations in Spanish in everyday life? Of course not. You might want to think about in this
I want my money back from my Spanish degree.
Entirely hypothetical scenario involving Spanish,
which was a bad choice.
Why that practicality of having conversations in Spanish with cultures around the world is being sacrificed in the name of 300-year-old European Spanish.
There's such category jumps there. Category jumps. It did not, my graduate Spanish school, I could agree with you with the complaint about it, but this is the problem, is that you say it's white supremacy or something like that, but the point of that degree was not to become applied fluent with all the slang of all the different world. I'd like a degree like that. That'd be interesting. I would have preferred to have done that myself, but that's not what the degree was.
As he keeps playing this Mozart sonata in the background, and he's talking about how outdated things are, it makes me wonder, he doesn't talk about it in his video, but is he in the opinion that sonata allegro form is just outdated and not to be used anymore? Because I've always viewed it as a wonderful discovery.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think just like didn't when the Weezer dude, when he went to Harvard, did he study music at Harvard?
I can't remember if he studied music or language. I think he was language.
But I was gonna say, like, I actually think Flea went to music school after being way long after being long popular and all that sorts of stuff. You don't need it. This stuff you can get to get more options in your arsenal and understand origins of discoveries. It's discovering origins. It's people who discovered things and like the history of the discovery of
I'm bothered by the dismissal. I'm bothered by constant dismissal and how it's outdated and stuff like that, because it's one of those things that we should be teaching. Like you said, you were surprised you went to choir in school. You didn't learn any music theory.
Yeah,
and you know what? When I went to college,
learned some slight sight reading of the line I was supposed to look at. I never learned why it was bouncing off the other people's stuff.
He doesn't talk about it at all. He's gonna talk about Schenker, but he's gonna ignore Walter Piston altogether. Walter Piston's an American theorist who picked up the Roman numeral ideas and went with it and wrote a book called Harmony. That was the first book ever recommended to me before I went to school. I read the whole book. I absorbed it. I read it multiple times. I know. And then I went to college and I went to music theory 1 class, and they're starting with everything I knew from the fundamentals. And so I said, can I test out of this? I tested out of music 1, 2, and 3. And I was surprised that most of my professors and most people that I talked to, see, I didn't do music in high school. I did it after. And so a lot of the students were like, no, we didn't learn that in choir. I'm like, you really?
We didn't learn anything in choir. We didn't learn anything. We just sat there and had the teacher kind of like give us his lines. There was some little bits of knowing which line in the thing you were supposed to follow if we were trying to sight read it first. But still, we still got taught the line by somebody playing it for us one at a time in each thing.
I mean,
and then
see, at the heart of everything, and I mean, I would hope Adam agrees with me on this. I am a big fan of teaching ABCs and do re mi's.
Yeah.
Okay. And if everybody learned that, they'd have a better appreciation of music together.
I've been playing guitar a long time. It's been like 30 years now. And all along, I wish I'd gotten into the stuff better from the beginning, but it didn't interest me as much as a little kid. I was just like, well, how about I just start playing the rock songs and all that sort of stuff. And the more I get into it now, every single time I get into a little bit more and I make another connection, I just lament that I didn't make that connection before 20 years ago. Each new connection I make, I go like, I should have had that connection when I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Well, and that's the thing is like, I'm starting to kind of look at it differently. I'm mad at myself for my youth. I was born with a lot of artistic talent, so I could draw and I could sculpt. And I realize now I focus so much on that. And I remember when I was a kid, my grandma had a piano. And I remember my friend was like, hey, can you pick out this melody? And I could, and I just ignored it. Like I had that ability. I assumed everybody who could draw had that ability.
Yeah.
And I didn't develop it. So then when I'm 17, I start writing music out of nowhere and discover that I'm actually better at that than drawing, right? But I'm 17 now. The brain has separated. I could not develop my perfect pitch.
There's a lot of stuff that overlaps with language acquisition, as we studied and learned about language acquisition, that there's some stuff that solidifies as native choices and native activity in a younger age, that there's always going to be like a slight delay of stopping and thinking about it. Even no matter how good you get at it, there'll be it's just like in English. I'm not having to stop and think about the words I'm saying. They're just coming out. But if it's a second language, I've always got to stop a little bit and think of the thing as it's coming out. And that same thing sort of happens with music. That doesn't mean you can't become a great composer, but I think it's kind of more just in real time.
Well, that's the weird thing. The weird thing is I discovered in music school, especially in my musicianship classes, when I would write melodies, I'd write the correct intervals, but I'd write it backwards. So I would have this weird sense. And one of my professors like pulled me aside. They looked at my compositions. They're like, you understand form. You don't really need to be able to do this, but I'm curious as to why you keep writing the right interval backwards. And I've noticed when I'm writing music today, if I have my headphones in and I'm writing the music, if I hear something and I'm like, oh, I know that it needs to go up a third.
Yeah.
And then I go, wait a minute, write it down. And I'll do the opposite. And I'm always right. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? Yeah. And I think it comes from focusing on the wrong talents and ignoring certain.
Well, there's just a million
talents.
things. Like if you really want to get into this stuff, and there's a reason Adam Neely's already studied it, and this other guy's already studied it. And now they can bitch about it after they've got it down. They're standing on the shoulders of giants and bitching about them.
And I just saw the giants and was like, wow.
Yeah, where is that? Where is that in the entirety of like the entirety of the deconstructive modern theory things are taking a dump on the giants of the shoulders you're standing on for stuff. But because every single thing I learn, even just in music, like in acoustic stuff, but even the applied guys, there's people who didn't know much theory, but like I learned so much from them because they just played it and did it and did it and did it and figured stuff out. And this is the deal. There's all sorts of guys in country music. Country music's like a good overlap. I'm sure it is in the R&B and other stuff too, because there's a lot of people in that who picked up all these different theory things, not from some sort of schooling, but after a while, they figured out some of the same precepts themselves. And then some people afterwards went and put the names and the words back into it of like, oh, that's a flatted third down to the way you get that country sound is you do the flat third and then pull it back down, and that you get a ton of country sounds just from that. But those guys were just figuring that out and doing it, and then somebody, the theory comes along and says, well, this is what that is, and you just put it in and it gives you that.
Well, and see, that's one of those other things, though. What you just were talking about, I can't imagine is not in that book.
Yeah.
On some context.
Yeah, there's a tension from the flat third. I said flat third down into the second, and then like a different flat third up. Just that slide one way to the other. There's so much country music's in that, but they did that, figuring that all out from the major scale, and then just adding in these two different kind of concepts. And then it's funny because like there's this guy Tony Rice who ended up adding in the blues into that, and all it really kind of ultimately is him figuring out kind of the same thing with the flatted fifth,
Well, I mean,
the flatted fifth down into the fourth, or the flatted fifth up into the fifth. And
he's going to talk about the diminished jazz scale thing coming up, and that's just a raised fifth,
yeah,
in a major scale, and it's like cool.
Yeah. The thing is like even if somebody figures out like a little trick that seems like rule breaky or tension buildy, it gets answered through the written out theory.
Grammar.
What they are way more loath to acknowledge is the race, the whiteness behind it, and
You
how
are
that
doing that.
actually
Yeah,
plays
that's
into
his
their
point.
own thinking.
So it's unfortunate. So
You
he's
are-
attacking them for being born
That's
white.
so much of critical race theory is that you are reifying that construct.
I mean, it's unfortunate,
And-
I guess, that white people made music.
There were some people who through white history definitely had those things like this is superior and it's superior because it's white. Those were a fringe of people, but most of the people are saying this is superior because it's superior, especially in the Enlightenment idea. The Enlightenment idea of let's get to the point of color blindness. This is just the music. This is just the science of it. This is just the idea of it, and anybody can do it. And
you
these
don't
guys
even-
are reifying back into
Yeah.
focusing on the skin
Again,
color.
I'll go down an argument path that they could do if they really wanted to talk about superiority. Let's talk about Mozart and Leopold, his father. Leopold Mozart, one, thought his wife was below his station and thought his son was a gift from God. He thought that his family was selected by God. And Mozart's genius is what made him superior to all human beings, right? They did have a superiority complex, but it was not because they were white.
To themselves,
It
it's
was-
my own family.
It's because Mozart was freaking genius.
Yeah, there's very frequently that, and that's one of the points that you make on this too. He can even say it how he started there. It's like Germans versus the Americans. Well, those Germans, we had a whole world war about it where millions of whites fought millions of whites about it because millions of those whites thought they were superior to millions of those other whites. And me being Irish and James being whatever mutt he is, we weren't ever part of your
I'm
Dumas, your French.
73% French.
Yeah, well, your French was
English.
overtaken by the those same Germans who
And
felt they were.
10% Pueblo Indian.
Oh my gosh,
I
about
have
this
to mention that.
You're
I have to
of
drop
color.
part of my race.
I'm like 1% Nigerian.
very history that we're talking
No,
about.
Congo. Sorry.
That's where the white apes are from.
When you think about the country, the United States, and you think about how structural race has always
Structural.
been, it wouldn't make any sense at all if a musical way, a methodology for how we can envision and teach and experience music were not white racially framed as well in a country that itself
Such word
is white
salad.
racially.
We're getting about an hour every 10 minutes on this.
People are loath to admit that any culture with a music, which is every culture, has not only a rich musical tradition, but a rich music theoretical tradition.
This is the other thing is there's all this fast forwarding going on that like, no, sorry, all along, we can at least say the last 100 years, 50 years for sure, there's been complete recognition of other cultures' amazing music. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's
Like
true.
we already beat this ghost that you're holding
The
up.
thing is, again, it's about tonality. Okay. So whether or not Chinese traditional music is more microtonal, it's not going to be atonal fully. And still, once Western music came along, they integrated it. If you listen to Latin music, you hear the tonal background that they chose to put with their flavor.
There's want to know what a lot of that cumbia and that and the accordion stuff comes from?
What?
German.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, that's the thing is,
It's
all of
German.
this Western
It's German
culture,
influence. So much of what we consider Latin country music right now is
like
German
all of
influence.
this Western culture and acknowledgement of harmony went out in the world, and then there's these people in these other cultures playing their music. Like, that's kind of cool. Let's add that to our music. I mean, are they going to talk about Astor Piazzolla? Like, he's
I'm
like,
going to talk about it.
he's one of the most amazing Argentinian composers. But it's like you can hear the Argentinian, and you can you can hear that God forbid.
Argentinians where most of those Germans went. He's probably German supremacy.
I mean, I think if you listen to Piazzolla, you're going to hear a lot of figured bass. You know what I mean? It's like,
Well, then welcome to this episode of the Basic Theory of Indian Music with me, Anuja Kamal.
I studied I should study some of those rhythms out of India and how they do their rhythms with like different sounds and stuff like that. And that really makes sense to me because I have a tough time sometimes like counting rhythms just in like 1, 2, 3, 4.
oh yeah.
And if something has like that word concept to it, it helps me think of the ideas, especially when it starts getting to stuff where it's like 3/8 or something that's like what are those 3 level of timings. If it really gets into that stuff, some of those Indian ideas of using these words to do it is really helpful for me. In fact, I should use it more in some of my own music that I.
Well, you should. This part,
not to write it in. I'm saying even when I'm playing, because sometimes when I'm playing like lead stuff, I lose track of where I am in the counts, and I could probably do it better if I use some of those ideas in like Indian music, like thinking of like boom, ticka, ticka, ticka. That's not the exact words they use, but
so this part we're going into, I was watching this, and before we go into it, I just want to say what Adam does here is point out that 2 cultures can discover the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, he may as well be talking about noodles.
yeah, noodles or math. You know, the number 0. You know,
Part 2 minor. You know there's other music theory, right?
well, we always did. And did you go to the University of Utah Music School and they said there's only Western music, James?
When I walked in, they said, we're not going to study anything but white Western. No, that's the thing is, I was in a jazz improv class, and I suck at jazz improv, but I sound pretty good in a classical setting. And my teacher was like, every time you play, it's like classical music comes out, which is okay, but I can't get you to jazzify it.
I've had that problem with you. I played in bands with you, and you classical out everything we do. You also have the problem of playing everybody's part at the same time because you can play all the things and hear all the things at the same time and all that sorts of stuff. But the idea that all these other cultures, there's always this thing. This is one of the tricks of critical race theory, is this fast forwarding and pretending the past 50, 60 years just didn't happen, of actually getting into pluralism and integration of other ideas and other things. We've been doing it well all along. And then you guys do this thing of saying, no one's never done it. And we've also got the views are an 1850s white supremacist still. And it's just a complete lie of what the actual situation has been in universities.
Okay, remember what you were talking about with the guitar and those flats and how it causes that country sound? What's going to happen here is she's going to sing, and there's an Indian technique where you kind of bend and slide in between notes.
That's written into some of this stuff too.
Well, he's going to compare it to portmanteau.
Yeah.
Anuja Kamat is a young singer that has a fantastic YouTube channel that goes over the basics of North Indian classical
It's a pretty
music.
voice too.
The
You
concepts
can't like it. You like tonality.
necessary to
It's his
perform it,
tone.
No.
and just
White
generally its vibe. She covers fairly technical things from tuning and temperament.
Each swara has a
That
range of
stuff. Sa-da-da,
Yeah.
mama.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and it starts back. So sa is do.
frequencies to itself in which it can operate. This range
and
is
then in
called
between-
swara kshetra.
To ornamentation.
It's funny
Let me
because
introduce you to the concept of
pitch is a
zamzam.
spectrum.
This is found a lot in Maharashtrian and Punjabi folk songs.
To rhythm.
This is one of the other things that you want to break down. Guess what's been going on in India since forever?
white people.
Not just white.
British.
No, white people didn't come till later. There's the British colonialism and all that stuff. But long before British colonialism or whatever, they've had a caste system. I guarantee, like, what this came out of. It came out of people who viewed themselves as supremacists over other Hindus and
course.
other Indians and all.
Well, the other thing is though too. Notice how she puts the thing in the middle where you go from tone to tone, and then in between is that slide, right?
Yeah.
But but she never says, let's live in this place. This is just,
It's
we're
got to
still
resolve.
going-
It's going to
We're
resolve.
still going from this tone to this tone. We're not going to live here. We're
I
going to
think some of those like Japanese or Chinese tonality things kind of stay in the dissonant. Don't
Yeah.
they? I don't know. I don't even know much about them. I
Well-
think they do resolve too a lot, but I think sometimes they stay in the
Adam doesn't do a very good job in this video about discussing.
Pythagorean. Yeah.
Huh?
The Pythagorean stuff, the stuff of figuring out that it's got that golden mean of hitting
Oh
these,
yeah, well, so I mean, he's going to talk about Pythagoras. He doesn't do a very good job about it because he doesn't really discuss what Pythagoras did, which was discover certain items of the same shape and weight will always make the same pitch.
Yeah.
So that's the mathematical element. If and he's a human being going, dang, if I make that bell shaped that way every time, this is the theory of how he discovered it. Every time it makes that pitch, that means, oh, there's a mathematical element.
There's something inside of that is
And what Pythagoras didn't realize was he was opening the gates to white supremacy.
that is scientific.
Tal is made up of specific syllables and specific beats. Lay is the distance between each beat.
And of course, the intricacies of melody as expressed through rag or ragas, if you're Anglo like me.
Rag means a melody which is used to express a feeling.
The basic structure of what I
It's
would
funny
call
that-
the major
They talk like that because one of the ways that Bach would have viewed writing music would have been through the thought of how is this melody in the, what's the way, was it the humors or something they used to think like this has to build this kind of emotion or this kind of emotion, but not thinking of a story per se, right? But that's a interesting thing. He's giving credit to this other set of theory for doing something that we do too.
Yeah.
major scale is the same in North Indian music.
Sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa. Same is applicable for a Western song.
And so,
So is that
Anuja able to
plagiarism?
sing Western songs using Indian solfege, like the one song from Twilight that I actually kind of like. I don't know why people dislike it. Do people dislike it? It's a nice song. Whatever.
I have died every day waiting for you. Ga pa ga dha pa re sa.
All of the subjects that she covers have rough parallels in Western music theory. In fact, she often does cross.
Rough parallels. They're,
I mean, I'm
they're
not
near they're near
seeing-
exact. but-
You know, he's gonna claim music's not a universal later, which is weird because he's proving it is right here. Unless the Indian culture said, let's copy completely the Western culture, it would seem that when we're dealing with pitches and frequencies, if we try to set them down and analyze them, both cultures kind of come up with the same set of notes.
Cultural comparisons, which serve to
But
highlight
there is something about that indie Western culture. I can't speak about it exactly, but it was more passed along in oral tradition. That's why that has some of that Saka Raga, but not as much written down probably until well after the
Events.
Mhm.
the similarities as well as the differences between Western music and North Indian classical music.
The phrase mere ga forms the identity of Yaman. So instead of taking sa re ga ma pa, you take mere ga ma pa. Every rag has a chalan. There are rules when it comes to combination of notes. For Western music students, this is exactly the difference between the Western concept of
Modes.
scale or mode and the
Mode,
Indian
yep.
concept of rag.
So Anuja is using Western theory as a foil to North Indian theory, as a means of understanding both of them a little bit better.
Okay, but here's the
This is
thing.
that was exactly a mode. That was a mode.
No, it is. But
And it's the same.
that's what's funny is,
Like he's acting
He's-
like it's so
he's saying-
different. Mhm.
so we're using words to describe sounds. But if you take away him talking and her talking and play
That's-
the Western version and her version, people are gonna go,
It's
okay.
a mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I see.
Thing that we just don't do in the West. Like, even if you are a trained musician, chances are the past 2 minutes of information has been completely new to you.
Me introduce.
No.
What?
I mean, it may be new information that they have different
This is part of the deal. Is like
Solfege.
that, like so much of these theories and the ideas and the things they bring out is duping people who don't know that much about a subject. You know what I mean?
Oh well, that's true, especially with music. And the
Like this is
discussing
going to
the-
be like, oh my gosh, to people who didn't even know the general major scale very well. You know,
Introduce you to the concept of Zamzam.
the concept of modes. If you didn't understand modes, you might have just had your mind blown about that mode stuff. But if you know modes, you just said, well, that's modes. You know,
What if that's something that we did, though? What if that cross-cultural relationship was kind of built into the way that we learned music theory?
Approach a music theory textbook the way that they all more or less start. They talk about rhythm and meter and pitch and scale. You can begin by putting out music theory and talk about Asiatic or African or Middle East. You can talk about the Americas, South America, ideas that came from all over the planet in terms of pitch, rhythm, meter.
The problem you're going to find, sir, is that in all of those cultures, it's already too late. The Western tonalities seeped in, and they've now married it.
They've married it, used it, and then the Western tonalities also has integrated this stuff into their own ideas of how to write stuff down, how to pass it along. It's just already there. You're
Well,
discussing a problem that's already
Here's the thing.
been well integrated forever.
I'm glad you touched on that, because music notation in and of itself is magical. And I mean, I'm on this page on Facebook that's like new 21st century. They're using sine wave symbols, all kinds of crazy things in their sheet music these days, right? Well, here's the thing about musical notation. It works. So what?
That's the issue. Yeah.
And probably most importantly, scale. Ragas and maqams immediately come to mind. And then you could pivot into a sections of the music theory that you and I were taught. So instead of having it be 50 examples by Bach, why not have 2 examples by Bach?
Because Bach wrote an exceptional amount of music.
There's the problem.
It's also exceptional.
Okay, Bach labeled out and helped everybody in the world. You could almost like call this Bach supremacy. Like, why should it even be white supremacy?
Yeah, I mean,
It's Bach supremacy.
he's going to talk about later. Bach was just obscure until Mendelssohn in the 19th century. No, Bach was a sacred thing that composers discovered, that even Mozart said when he was introduced to Bach's music through one of his friends who had some. Like, the rumor is Mozart said, I knew I was the greatest composer alive. I didn't know someone before me was better. So that's one of those things that.
But Bach, you could almost look at as like, he was almost a scientist about it. He was like the guy who said,
Kind of.
He's that guy who said, I'm going to try to do all the different possible variations of
I would liken him more to a
counterpoint
monk.
that I could do.
I think what Bach, me and Jeff have discussed it a lot. Bach completed counterpoint.
Yeah,
He
well, that's what I'm
saw-
saying. He's almost a scientist of counterpoint. He's like,
But
let me
yes.
see if all the different rules,
But
all
see,
the different things, all the different sounds. that can
Where
come out
his
of counterpoint.
contemporaries were starting to go simpler into the classical idea of more of a homophonic setting with the chords and the melody on top. Bach's like, we're not done with this fugue stuff. And he's right. If you listen to a lot of the Baroque music, there's something different about it where Bach completed it. And he, first of all, he wrote everything for the Lutheran Church. You know, he worked for the church his whole life. And
Lutheran supremacist, white supremacist, Bach supremacist. Like, where do you cut off that line of deciding that this is now like just deciding it's a white thing?
Well, it's like
you're creating that construct.
it's like last time I saw Flip and I said, well, Bach's the greatest musician of all time. And he said, that's just your article of faith. Okay.
Yeah.
Of me some Bach. Bach is awesome. But he was a relatively obscure composer in his day and
Oh,
rarely
yeah.
performed in the
That
years
matters.
after his death. It was only through the efforts of people like Felix
He was obscure
Mendelssohn
'cause
that
nobody
his
could
music
understand his
kind of
genius.
became the staple of the repertoire.
They thought he
That
was out fashioned
archival
and
work
outdated,
necessary
too.
to preserve the legacy of the few
How many
people of
times have we heard
color and
that?
women working within European music at the time just never happened.
Why not have a woman composer in your example from 1700? Why not have
Oh, how about we go back to like 1049 and talk about Hildegard von Bingen?
EOC?
I mean,
if
that's one of the first musicians that we learned about. Of course, she was a polymath, I think is the word, where she was a musician and a horticulturist and
This
like
is
everything.
the problem is that this universities already have been trying to integrate this stuff for decades. They already have. Like they talk about it like it's this super stringent thing that it has not been. In fact, they're always looking for something new to glom onto or announce
Why
as a
not
new
have
discovery of
woman?
amazing.
I mean, they act like there's not one woman in that book.
But it's honestly this thing of like, why don't we just fix the thing that we've already been doing for forever? It's such gripiness, you know.
The Renaissance
Well,
example.
And so partially as a result, we have a very limited and monochromatic canon. Definitely go check out 12 Tone's video on the classical canon if you haven't already. It's a great video that definitely helps put the music of Beethoven and Bach in some historical perspective.
And then right there on page 152.
What was that guy's video? We should watch it. I've never seen it. Who's that?
I don't know, but you know, it's like
Beethoven. Why not? He deserves a seat at the table.
Context for people.
He wasn't a bad composer, as I said in my.
This is so irritating. He's talking about Beethoven.
And like Beethoven wasn't a bad composer.
John McWhorter called this guy out on this so hard. He just like saying that dismissiveness is so performative.
I mean, you gotta try and understand how he can come to this conclusion, but I don't.
This conclusion, it's not a conclusion. It's a praxis.
Okay, it's a practice.
He's not a practice.
It
Praxis.
reminds me.
He is pushing his theory hard.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing: Beethoven changed the world in such a way it's so profound. In fact, when I say this, people laugh at me. It's true. He changed everything during his lifetime. Poor Schubert.
I laugh at you for that.
You know, I mean, he lived in his shadow. When he died, people were like, "Oh, finally!" But
We need to just leave this. This is ridiculous because James here could do a month on Beethoven without stopping. So,
and the fact that this guy's just like, he's an okay guy.
but that's part of his praxis. What I mean by praxis is like putting activism into your theory. Like he is trying to he's trying to irritate you with that dismissiveness.
Yeah.
You know?
My blog, he was an above average.
He's above average composer.
Composer.
So like he knows the performative little
I mean,
ditty dance he's doing.
Other people who analyze Beethoven have tried to. There's websites you can go to.
We know Beethoven.
Where they try and talk about the IQ of these people, and I want to say that it's a consensus that Beethoven had an IQ of 175, but you know, he was above that.
We know anybody watching this, anybody who has any idea of music knows that what he's doing there is a performance of bullcrap, being that dismissive.
By golly, happy to play him, happy to hear him. I don't have a problem with Beethoven. I have a problem with what happened after he died in 1827.
In his article on the composer Florence Price,
What the world was like,
the classical
sitting
music
there
critic Alex Ross
with the
warns
most amazing
Reducing music
masterpieces
history
that they
to
had to
pageant.
protect and figure out.
Of masters is at bottom lazy. We stick with the known in order to avoid the hard work of exploring the unknown.
What
Okay.
we've done is
Can we break that down?
Let's
Studying
let
only
him
the
do it. Let's let
masters
him
is
do it.
lazy.
Let's hear him continue on it.
Do you know how
Musical
hard it is to
example.
try and understand these people, the masters?
that represent probably not even 0.1% of the world's music. We have claimed.
And Dr. Peterson talks about that element as an
Pareto.
impressive feat that they did.
Well, but there's part of the they're complaining about the Pareto distribution. Again, the Pareto distribution is the same thing that happens with money. It's the same thing that happens in nature. Is that 1% of the music people in the entire world, not just in the classical world, but 1% of the music of anybody in any given field are going to rise to the top as something that is the thing that gets spread out to the world. And even in them, 1% of their music is going to be what's going to be held to. It's really funny to me because I used to watch Owen Benjamin. The guy's bonky, but he'd always kind of show off his piano stuff, and he'd say, "Oh, I'm such a great composer." And he'd always do this thing of saying, "Hey, somebody give me a classical song request, and I'll play it just right offhand." And if you say that to a crowd of people, all you have to know is 5 classical songs, because if you say that to a crowd of people, so one of them's going to say one of those 5 classical songs, and then you can play one of those 5 classical songs and act like you're able to take classical music requests.
I remember watching that video you showed me where Dr. Peterson talks about that. And when you really look at it, even all of Mozart's pieces, 636, Beethoven wrote over 700, Bach wrote over 1,000. You really only know whether it's popular,
2, 3, 4, 5. Well, a random person, 1 or 2. from
one or
each.
two.
They
and-
know more, but they didn't know that that
See-
was that person they were hearing all the time.
See, and like, for example, this quartet is the best thing I've ever written that will probably never be known.
You want to know why it won't be known anymore? You want to know where I heard most of my classical music? I think I figured it out. Looney Tunes. You
Yeah.
go back and listen to Looney Tunes.
Well-
Every single Looney Tunes was loaded with like really kind of a widespread range
True.
of classical music.
But again, back to ABC's Do Re Mi. The people of the past liked and appreciated music for music's sake more because they understood those basic.
They used to do it, but at the same time too, I think kids nowadays, even our age, we got raised on a lot more classical music than we realized because people were using it as the background music of stuff.
We did,
And that's happening less and less and less nowadays. So like even kids are being exposed to less and less classical music.
I mean, if we're going to give one complaint to anything in my entire life, most of the things that I get from people is I don't understand. It has no words.
Yeah.
You know, I don't get why it has no words.
Claimed that it is music theory, not Western, not white music theory, not even Western music theory for music. Kind of.
Because it is.
It does. It covers everything.
Because it is. It's a type of theory that can integrate all the other theories that you're talking about.
They know that the audience isn't going to read these books. That's a big textbook. I keep saying it. I'm sure it's all in there.
But beyond that too is like they're making a cutoff. Like the concept of music theory, they're making that cutoff. The concept of music theory can integrate other. It's free to integrate other discoveries into it and still call it music theory.
Like again, like you said, when I walked into the university, there was no signs that said we don't do this here. Blah blah blah. It's like I always thought anyway. While we were focusing mainly on the Western thing, you know, music history at the university starts in ancient Rome and Greece.
But the problem is they also don't like that the melting pot of stuff. They want to keep stuff a mosaic. Does that make sense? Like they don't like that something gets melted in to music theory and gets called, well, this is all music theory. They like the concept of these are separate but different things. So we got to call this black music theory and we got to call this white music theory. And like you guys are forcefully trying to create this mosaic. That's one of the ideas of critical race theory. A mosaic is like a piece of art where there's like a little separate little thing for each of the parts of the picture.
It's weird.
And they want to draw the lines. They are creating these racial lines or these arbitrary divisions. Whereas the previous like colorblind concept of Enlightenment theory was the melting pot that we're going to all melt in.
You were talking about Jungian ideas of everything coming back. And what are they doing? They're resegregating everything.
Yeah, exactly. That mosaic idea is a segregation idea. It's a separate but equal idea.
I knew this was going to be like this. I knew it was going to be hard not to interrupt every second.
Yeah, well, that's how these go. All right, but we'll see if we can, because it usually also goes like this, that after a while we start going, all right, let's let more of it ride before we start coming.
Let's let more of it ride, especially going into, they're about to make some big leaps. If I remember correctly.
World, right? I mean, that's just so absolutely illogical. It doesn't make any sense at all. A 5/7 going to 1, fine. The 7th goes down by a step, sure. And you actually contextualize it and you have other music. Oh yeah, do you remember the Raga we studied?
Nobody but a person who knows music is going to understand what he said first.
But it's so dismissive of it. It's just, it's that, like so many of these cynical theories, is it dismissive of these discoveries, these ideas, these perfections. Not, I call it perfections, but the past uses and people who've demonstrated how to use stuff and invented uses of these ideas. He's standing on the shoulders of all this stuff that he's green. You can grate at it because you were lucky enough to be born in an age where you could be taught every single one of those ideas.
Again, his dismissal of Beethoven. He is assuming he's as gifted and brilliant as Beethoven because he knows all these theories.
Because he learned from Beethoven.
Yeah.
Or from others that learned it from Beethoven. You're standing on the shoulders of giants and getting to sneer at it.
Studied in chapter 2. Let's think about it now in relation to this piece by a Renaissance composer, maybe Lusitano, who was mixed race like me.
Let's put this into practice.
That's the only reason he probably cares about him. Like, I bet you if the guy was a white guy and had the same music, he wouldn't give two giant dumps about the actual music itself.
To see how we might do this kind of cross-cultural theory analysis. Why does Anuja singing the rag Shuddha Kalyan sound similar to Kathleen Battle singing Xavier Montsalvage's song Ninge Ninge?
Noodles.
These two examples come from different cultures and so use different musical theory, but they arrive at a similar sounding kind of melody. They have the same scale degrees or swara. In the West, we would say do, la, sol, mi.
Funny thing is, like, I guarantee you, Adam Neely only learned and pretends to like do the double thing like this for this one freaking video,
Well,
and he'll never go back to
even
thinking
in
of a
this
swara
comparison-
again in his life.
In this comparison, it's like in the West we did this, over here they did this. It sounds the same. They named it differently again, but they're just using their language to describe something they discovered. It's like if this was noodles, he'd be like spaghetti, and ramen.
He's not gonna.
He'd be like instead of scale degrees, he'd be like flour.
Yeah.
Over here, it'd be like what is it? Oat flour or something like.
Yeah. And he's not gonna divert to forever using the other language for it to be Mr. Wokey Pants.
And in India, you'd say sa, da, pa, ga. And they both use the ornamentation of portamento or meaned, that bending, sliding
Oh yeah,
effect.
portmanteau.
Meaned is nothing but a glide, a smooth glide from one note to the other.
Western theory would probably consider these notes a subset of the major pentatonic scale, but
It's
Rag
funny
Shuddha
because-
Kalyan is a little bit.
It's very popular in string music, and as you play guitar, you know what a portmanteau is. And what's funny is when you start writing for stringed instruments, you open up to do these cool things and play with the tones in between tones. The piano can't give you. The piano is even tempered. You can't do slides or glides, right? The mimicry in bebop and jazz
You
is
can
cool.
kind of slide in horn wind instruments, right?
Oh yeah.
Mm.
The glissando at the very beginning of Rhapsody in Blue is like incredible.
Bit more specific. The meaned, that bending, is actually an integral part of the rag itself.
For example, Rag Shuddha
So it's more used. It's used more often in theirs than this, so it's totally different.
Yeah, that's
Kalyan.
what gives you that Indian sound.
But what I'm saying is, like, he's making it like it's totally a different thing just because it's more often.
has meaned from sa to dha and pa to ga. That is the essential identity of Rag Shuddha Kalyan. So, sa dha pa.
She sounds awesome.
It does because, they like to stay in between in that spectrum.
But it also, like, your ears wait for it to
I mean,
to hit the
a
resolution.
person with perfect pitch would probably be able to hear all of the hertz in between.
Mm.
You know, I don't know. I don't have perfect pitch, but someone would be able to be like, yeah, she goes from like 330 to 275 there.
There's something about it too, that like if there's all this distance between the two pitches, there's a weird thing, like they do fast on this part and then slow on this part right before hitting it. And there's probably some way to write that out too, which would be a bit scientific, you know.
Portamento is more
Yeah.
an expressive technique in the West. It's not quite as foundational. You can have the pentatonic
So totally different, totally
scale
different.
without the bending. In traditional North Indian classical music, different rags are associated with different times.
And then you have the problem of a amateur singer who does that completely on accident, and they do all the sliding. Like all the amateur people, you try to get them like, stop sliding if it's not supposed to be there.
Oh, look.
Oh, there's a slide. We'll show them.
I have a portmanteau in my string quartet.
Did you appropriate it?
I don't
I don't know
know.
if I'm showing it right.
It sounds like a nice glide down to that.
But that's how it's written out. But
of
But
the
again,
day. And Shuddha Kalyan is an
I'm still
evening.
trying to understand
Ninge
why
Ninge
it's
is
bad
a
that we did one way and they did
But
it
there's
a
a-
different way. But
there's a long problem with amateur singers that you can't get them to not slide this stuff. You know what I mean? Like if you
Yeah.
want them to do, no, please give me a, don't do me a,
that's the thing is appropriately good singing. I think he does point out in the video here the analysis of like sound waves.
yeah.
Like a good singer is not always on tune. That sounds fake.
Yeah. That's one of the problems with the new digitized world is you start
It's
most people, I used to say this, like the big problem that people had for years with Nickelback was over perfected in the studio. People don't realize like so much of what the irritation of their sound was like, it's just perfected simplicity
I mean,
in the studio.
I
And
watch a lot of videos, so I don't know if it's this video where they go over Karen Carpenter's voice, but it's in the video. One video I watched, it was showing why her voice was so beautiful. She would always hit the note, but it's where she went after between notes and how that shape looked that made her voice so beautiful.
Lullaby.
In fact, it's kind of the Western culture to just write the notes, and then if you want a particular style, put that above, you know? And you don't have to say, hey, play in the gray areas between notes. Most people sing, that's what Mariah Carey's doing so beautifully. And then you can hear when someone crappily imitates it, right?
Yeah.
And lullabies are traditionally sung in the evening, although the pentatonic scale doesn't really have that kind of temporal relationship. In the West, scales don't have to be performed at certain times of day, but that is kind of an interesting coincidence.
Interesting coincidence. I mean, some of those things, like you see how they're trying to make like a big deal out of nothing. I mean, it's just saying like we could totally start saying, hey, we're gonna go up in the morning and we're gonna go down at night. Like,
he's also kind of making a broad generalization that music never had a time and place. I mean, masses, but again, rooted in Christianity deeply.
Many different peoples have taken the idea of rhythm and meter and pitch and scale, for example, and done many different things with it. And you fold in
There's
the
still
idea
those same
of
principles, though,
and they can be put into music theory.
Western tonality as one of those things, which it is. And it has been influenced by all of them.
This is the postmodern stuff of trying to make everything relative and everything simple and everything just equally nothing and
that's the
equally
problem.
important. But at the same time, too, there's always the sense of, but we need to actually push up what's been marginalized. We're not doing proper academics unless we push up what's been marginalized.
Again, they come to reality, and they hate the reality of it. And that is, yeah, okay, fine. It is one thing. We'll put this one Western culture approach to music in the music book. Oh, somehow everyone likes it, though. It is a little bit bigger than all the other parts together. It's done a little bit better job of explaining and writing down these principles and observations that he's about to say are not universal.
Yeah.
Those things and vice versa. There's no question about that. All of a sudden, you just get a beautifully contextualized picture of music and music theory. Western music theory will continue to be part of the curricula as it should be, because it is such
That's so nice of him.
an integral part of the American musical experience.
It's really comes down to a matter of
It's an integral part of learning how to do music. Come on.
perspective. Perspective aids in understanding. And even within the Western canon, we generally have only looked at music from this one perspective.
You got to say the word generally in there because you know that it's just not true that it's only been that. You don't like that it's got a heavy majority in
I mean, the
study.
frustration is it's upsetting. He's insulting fine art.
Yeah.
There's a reason why this stuff is looked at.
When there are in fact many. Part 3 minor 7 flat 5. People who are not white men.
3 minor 7 flat 5.
George Russell is a teacher as well as a composer. You were associated specifically
George
with
Russell's
adventures
awesome.
in tonality.
George Russell was a mixed race jazz musician who wrote a
And
very
that matters.
It matters to
Cause-
them because they're racist.
influential jazz education method called
I'm mixed race.
the Lydian chromatic concept, otherwise known as
The Lydian concept of tonal organization. This, I think, you must explain.
There are essentially two kinds
I don't look that mixed, though.
of tonal gravity. Vertical,
Does he look that mixed? I mean, he's white passing to me.
No, I mean,
That
he
is
clearly has
tonal gravity
a
inferred
mix
by
of some kind, but
the
his
chord,
cultural tone and his voice is very American.
where the chord
He's as white passing as Flip is, who Flip is a mixed race. But
infers the tonic.
I don't like
And
Brazilians. Just kidding.
horizontal tonal gravity. Tonal
if it's a race, mixed nationality, mixed race, who knows?
gravity inferred by the scale. For instance, a blues scale.
His New York Times obituary describes it as
a way for jazz musicians to improvise in any key on any chord without sacrificing.
This is exactly what you've been talking about. This guy invented that.
Well, he labeled it out, yeah.
Roots.
His system does not use
awesome.
the major scale as the primary method of organizing harmony, and instead uses the Lydian scale, which ended up being very influential on Miles Davis with his modal jazz approach on Kind of Blue, which was the greatest selling jazz.
And all of these modes fit over a tonal chordal system
of all time. His ideas of the Lydian chromatic concept have gained traction at some universities, like New England Conservatory, for example.
What are you talking about? Like a Lydian mode? Like the Lydian mode is not. The Lydian mode is not foreign to composers at the University of
Lydian
Utah.
mode became so the main major mode is called the Aeolian mode, and the Lydian mode was long before that. We were doing modes. Like I said, Renaissance was all modes. Not tonality, but in general, but major scale, the Aeolian scale, which we've just known our whole life.
That is Ionian.
Is relatively
Ionian.
new if you look at it historically.
It's Ionian, isn't it?
Huh?
Ionian.
Oh yeah, Ionian. Sorry, Aeolian's the minor mode. Sorry. Like I said, I mix up right and left all the time. I mix up words all the time. But yes, sorry, the Ionian mode. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
I just looked way better than James at music theory. Let me tell you right now, James will tap dance around me in the Ionian mode or Aeolian mode. He just said the wrong word.
But
happens
jazz
all
in
the time.
general has a long tradition of non-white theorist educators who have attempted to codify the language of bebop, like David Baker, for example, and of course the absolute legend himself, Barry Harris.
I borrowed the diminished notes. Now watch.
Barry Harris is famous for his work with what some people call the bebop scale, or the major scale with an added sharp 5, but what he calls the sixth.
You were talking about that mode earlier, weren't you? Or they mentioned it.
Yeah, I was remembering when they talked about it, and I was thinking, okay, that's cool. I still don't know why they're saying that. Is there a no?
It all fits in theory. It all fits in theory. Like I was saying, the country stuff, the notes between that third and between the second and the third, and then between the third and the fourth get used a whole lot, and it becomes country.
Right there
in blues, major blues. What he's saying, the note between that 4 and the note between that 5 gets used a whole lot.
Why is Adam choosing to use a staff with a treble clef and whole notes to represent this? He's saying that this theory doesn't matter, but using theory to represent it.
Diminished scale.
Tomorrow, everybody should know all the 6 diminished scales. Let's see, diminished notes are weird notes. They say, move me somewhere.
Yeah.
And they really do. They say, move me.
But that's the same thing that happens with those notes in the third too.
Yeah, but again, like you said, fits in theory, and nobody's saying that he was not a genius.
Yeah.
His approach to tonal harmony is both idiosyncratic and also incredibly useful for jazz
He's been
improvisers.
careful to keep talking about tonal harmony. I don't remember him going into atonality.
Anybody who wants to improvise within tonal harmony.
When you hit the,
but this is all in theory. It's all all usable in theory.
Major 7, watch. Now we think of that as a complete chord, but really that chord is saying. That's what it says. The major 7 really is.
That's what all they're saying.
With one undiminished note.
George Russell and Barry Harris developed their systems for jazz.
We talk about that in theory constantly. In fact,
the consequence of making a dissonance and resolving it, and which way that dissonance wants to resolve is.
I want to say it was the Rick Beato video where he was pointing out that Bach used like a major 13th chord as the consequence of his counterpoint, or one of those crazy radical chords that wasn't really discovered till jazz. Well, actually, there's a lot. In fact, Bach has 9ths and 7ths galore as consequences of this beautiful counterpoint that he was able to produce.
Improvisers. But since jazz harmony is largely tonal, as well as a lot of European classical music, there is no reason why you couldn't simply adopt their systems to look at the music of Chopin or Beethoven.
Exactly.
Or
I
Brahms
agree
or
fully
Mahler,
with this guy.
Any 19th century European classical composer. just that nobody has done that before.
What? I mean, where does that claim come from? How does he know no one's done that?
And honestly, to me, it just makes a lot more sense to analyze Chopin through the sixth
Is Adam
diminished.
Neely saying he's the first person to analyze Chopin with jazz?
Even calling it a sixth diminished is part of music theory.
It is. The fundamentals, again,
Scale
everything
that
is the fundamental 12.
Does through figured bass.
We've only seen music from this angle, and it's been a white angle and it's been a male angle, and together, not
There we go.
or, but white and male. And we've completely put everything else out. We've excluded everybody else. I mean, nobody should really.
No, it has not.
That's
sit
what,
there and say that
but
this
yet
didn't happen.
every example of other music he can put in our Western culture.
They've already shown us all
alphabet.
these people included in it anyway. There's all these people already included in it.
You know what the best part about the staff system is? It says, here's 5 lines.
Yeah, it was
and
the
you can
Enlightenment.
put the dots wherever you want.
The concept of the Enlightenment was bring the scripture word, the word of the scripture to the people so they can play with it how they want to play with it. This is bring the written music, the ideas of the music, the how to write out the music and how you can learn to do the music and see it to you. It's all written out for you to also
You've
do
heard
it. So you can figure out that this sixth, that note between what we call the 6th and the 7th makes a cool thing to
Here's
create
the
a
thing.
whole other different type of music.
You've heard some of my marching band stuff, and a lot of the drums I've been writing with Van. Van knows how to write drum notation. We have drum notation. In fact, one of the hardest things to write is drum notation. And the funny thing is, they're talking about we ignore all of these cultures. Here's the thing. Let's just take the basics. I don't know. We'll go to a basic bare tribal situation, mostly banging on sticks and drums and stuff. Well, with our Western notation system, you can draw a line and say wooden stick. And then you can draw another line and be like 2 rocks. And you can put dots.
It just has to be Beethoven.
But you
No.
Our system
does this say Beethoven on it? This is not music theory.
That's the point, though, is that our system allows us to actually notate everything. We could notate.
Yeah, it's this. The whole thing is designed to integrate any concept scientifically into how this might have worked.
You could
like
do
here's
an
how you could
elephant
write
bone
it.
song.
Here's how you could put it out. This might be what's going on. It's sometimes. I think even inside of music theory, every once in a while, it comes across something that it kind of goes, oh, what's going on there? We can't figure out right exactly what's going on. So there'll be kind of arguments with like, no, I think that is in this key. No, I think it's in this key. No, I think it's in that key. Because there's all sorts of things that are ambiguous like that. And that's one of the interesting and fun things to do with the theory that you're trying to sort out. And people wouldn't even be able to talk to each other if we didn't have a language around that. We wouldn't be able to try to. You can go onto YouTube. There's all sorts of things that are like ambiguous key songs. And you can find things that are ambiguous key songs. How can we need this musical theory to have the language for me to discuss like, no, I think that's in B. Like, no, I think it's an E. And you can't even start without the musical theory.
Well, that's the funny thing. Obviously, when I'm around you or Jeff Anderson or Matt, when we're really talking about music, being able to talk about the components theoretically helps drive the conversation and helps us understand our individual perceptions. Because as a philosophical point, a person who's, whether they're a songwriter, composer, singer, they need to at least be able to express in certain words what's going on.
Yeah. I think it's real funny too, because there's been a lot of times I've been around these like high level music theorists who really know all the stuff and can like transpose what key it's in at all times and kind of look at it. And you come from a world of guitar where people are able to learn from the guitar how to do a certain chord or something. And they have these shapes. And so they do these shapes. So it's almost kind of more visual. And so a bunch of people will kind of write songs on the guitar. And as they write it, they'll kind of break some theory rules. And then you bring that. It's very kind of amateur original stuff. You can do it with all these sorts of things they call power chords, which is playing off of fifths and stuff like that. So you can bring these things that have these fifths that have all these implied things inside them because they're just fifths, the power chords. You bring it to some high level theorist, and they'll get their mind blown a little bit. Like, what are you doing there? Like, what are you doing? Like, who would have thought of that? Who did it? You guys sit there and all start trying to figure it out, and they don't realize that the guitarists are just like, you know, and that's all they're doing.
Well, again, here's something
I see that happen even on like famous YouTube videos where they're talking about famous bands and they're talking about other people. I've watched it happen with you, where I'll put it like this: the song Dock of the Bay, the song Dock of the Bay, you can like try to evaluate that from a theory perspective. Like it's all in major chords, and the theorist can be like, what key is this in? Because it's like all these major chords, and they're thinking like a theorist might have thought of, I'm going to choose a new major, I'm going to choose a major, I'm going to choose a major. I watch it and I think somebody wrote that who only knew major chords. They just went up and down the scale and did, and I guess this sounds all right.
You know what? The funny thing is they don't talk about this. It turns out that the instruments matter.
Yeah,
a lot to how things work.
Yeah, it changes your brain around. There's so much about the horn stuff I didn't realize from that.
Oh yeah, well,
I didn't realize you guys
wind stuff, like
it's going to change your brain if you have to.
Yeah, I mean winds are the biggest pain in the butt because of all the overtones.
Yeah.
So how you know,
and then to create different notes, they have to do such crazy different things. It's not like so linearly understandable. But son of a gun.
Well, like how hard is it to understand transposed instruments? How many times have you heard the conversation where it's like, how come if you're playing a B flat clarinet, you just don't write it? And it's because it's like a transposed instrument. You got to understand, you know, when you play a C, you just hear it a half step down.
Yeah.
And it's for writing purposes. Like, you know, the French horn, I think, is a fourth below. So you write everything a fourth above. It sounds a fourth below. You don't have to deal with all these ledger lines and stuff. And the instruments matter. Especially when it comes to harmony, especially when it comes to wind instruments. Wind does a lot of crazy things. There's a lot of overtones that die off. It doesn't happen with one of the things is I did watch a cool video by a guy. He's like, I'm a composer. What is the composer's instrument? Piano, usually. Well, like you were talking about, pianos and guitars are different. So you're going to come across some cool things that guitars do naturally. You're not going to think to do on a piano.
Yeah.
And male. And we've completely put everything else out. We've excluded everybody else.
No, we did not.
Nobody should really sit there and say that this didn't happen. That's
he
just
gets
what
to say
music
that.
theory is.
One very interesting exception to this is in Russian music theory, where there are actually a number of female perspectives.
The other music theorist is Valentina Holopova. She's a good.
Wait. He said in Russian music, and then he went to female, but the Russians are still white.
Russians were super patriarchal.
A friend of Sofia Gubaidulina.
This is kind of a holdover from Soviet practice, which saw culture, like music, as more of a feminine activity. And so there is a long tradition of Russian female music theorists.
Maybe those Soviets are better than us Western white fascists.
Okay, so notice how he just said, though, Russian female theorists. So these are still going to be people that are just analyzing Korsakov, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Prokofiev. I mean, what? So there's going to be this rich Russian tradition. And as I said, it's funny. Prokofiev himself said, all I need is sonata form or something to that effect. Like, okay, that's not a Russian concept, sir.
Gubaidulina, a contemporary composer, and her friend Holopova came up with a way of analyzing her music, and she called it a parameter complex. And she had different categories of ways of grouping together sounds, how you articulate sounds, dynamics, and other methods. Five ways of doing so.
In Holopova's theory, any musical element can either be consonant or dissonant. So staccato, playing the notes short, might be a dissonant expression parameter, versus legato, playing them long and connected, that might be a consonant expression.
She's invented new theory that's easily put into theory.
Kind of a strange.
That's what always happens, and it's just they're just different words. It's kind of like different languages, you know, different languages for the same thing.
Idea, thinking about articulation, how you.
But that gets to reading. Derrida is really big into the idea of how you word stuff completely alters the world that you see things, and you're never really actually communicating the exact same thing to each other, which I think falls apart entirely, especially when it comes around people discovering kind of the same concepts that hold true. That, I mean, maybe in music, like in physics, there's something that is universal across the board. That
here's the thing:
it's discoverable. It's hanging out there in our ether for us to discover.
I have no problem with what he's saying here or adding this extra thing. He's discussing the articulation and stuff. How come he's not discussing Mahler who a lot of conductors even complain gave too much direction to what he wanted done with the notes, right? So he's talking about making sure the notation is everything. Well, there's been composers that have done that.
Physically play your instrument in terms of consonance and dissonance, but if you really think about it, there might be something to that.
She talked about it with respect to Gubay Dulina, but you could easily expand that and just begin to look at all kinds of 20th century significant composers.
But the first thing to acknowledge is that music theory has a perspective to begin with, and that is actually kind of hard to wrap your head around if you're not used to it. So you remember when we listened to Ninge Ninge and compared it to Raga Shuddha Kalyan like 5 minutes ago? Good times. Acoustically, the melodies were similar, but there were two different music theories behind the performances. So yeah, you could say that.
No, there was because you could have told the Ninge Ninge person to through that same language to try to do the other thing.
He's claiming there's two sets of theory, and there's not. There's one idea being analyzed by two different.
Yeah, there was an effect.
Styles.
There was an effect. Yeah, there was an effect, a style in the music that it was decided to do. You could have told the Ninge Ninge person to through the Western ways to try to sing it the other way.
That Anuja was singing a descending major pentatonic scale,
and you could tell her to. I'm sure she has something in her music too that could say, "Let's not do the slides."
I mean, why did he still say she's singing a descending pentatonic scale? That's him using his superior way of analyzing it.
But that makes about as much sense as saying Kathleen Battle was singing the descending form of Raga Shuddha Kalyan. There is definitely something that gets lost.
No, it's not different. It's not different. They want it's this Derridian thing that they kind of want their constructs to make the world a universe of difference, and it isn't.
In translation there, the same way when you translate something from English to Hindi, for example. Spoken language is not universal, and neither is music. Part 4, Major 7. Music,
my favorite part,
is not a universal.
Now hold on, Donald.
There's this.
Those old Disney videos are great. Have you watched them?
Oh yeah, they're great.
They really cover
this
like
part.
How they discovered the different things back to the Greeks.
Deep sense that music is somehow above culture.
You like music, don't you?
Well, see,
culture. It's out there. It's underneath the culture.
This is what I was about to say. The way he says music is universal is to say it's not because the culture's influence on it causes different styles. So therefore, it's not. But again, back to the fundamentals. Those fundamentals are universal.
That music is transcendent, like mathematics. It's
yes.
It is. He's just saying
universal. Math is math.
Yes, and math is math too.
He offers no proof.
This is the ultimate. This is the ultimate thing of all these postmodernists who are trying to create these differences that aren't there. One of the huge ways to try to express this sort of thing. Listen to James Lindsay's podcast on how they try to make 2 + 2 = 5, and then you see that all they are doing is tweaking. They're the ones tweaking concepts. Like they've got to alter around the chessboard to make it different. It does not change the math in any way, shape, or form. It's you guys thinking that language has this superpower to it. There's all this stuff in the humanities that they think language has a superpower to it that actually affects the.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I think that one thing that's going to be interesting, I'm excited for this reaction, because I've shown very few people this string quartet, but I decided to use 4-part counterpoint in a tonal setting for a reason. I believe it's hard. And the consequence is that it sounds very contrapuntal.
This is you. This is you right now. This is your energy you're giving off, talking about your super strong, difficult stuff. You're just Mr. Invincible who's strong, but you don't realize that you're actually strong when you have to be Mr. Mom.
Well, that's the thing I don't understand. They're going to tell me, like I said, that's easy stuff. It's been done before. And no, like I said, from scratch, no. What's easy is writing counterpoint in an atonal setting. Does not have to sound good.
Yeah, there's a million options, you know.
Music is music.
Let's go to ancient Greece.
to the time of Pythagoras.
Pythagoras is widely hailed in popular culture as the father of both mathematics as well as music.
Mathematics and music?
Music was taught as part of the quadrivium in medieval Europe, alongside astronomy, geometry, and mathematics.
And now he's going to make a claim music shouldn't have been there.
Was number in time, geometry was number.
Music's created by the culture.
Actually,
and it
let's
does
pause
not.
that for a second. Here's the funny thing. I was thinking about this with music in general. We are trying to capture something we can't see and only exists in time. And now let's bitch about all the men who were able to capture a moment in time and frame it on paper.
And there's something obviously universal about it. It's universally understandable and hearable and doable.
I mean, we all can sing. What's that about?
Yeah. So they're doing the postmodern thing of trying to deconstruct a thing, and I think they fail hard at it because it does just exist. It does just exist out there in the ether. You could also say, well, it's all a construct of our brains because our brains are decided to like that how these different things sound together, which is true because the dog's not going to like how it sounds together. So there's something developed in our brains that decide something in those sounds pleases. But
exactly, but I mean, what's the claim here? The claim here is that here's the quadrivium: mathematics, geometry, and astronomy. We're going to keep those. We're going to take music out, though. We're going to claim it's not a universal. In fact, this whole quadrivium thing is like the model that the Earth is the center of the universe. That's what they're basically saying. This is outdated, but they're not going to offer proof as to why. We know the Earth isn't the center, okay? And we had to refigure that model. How is music not a universal? Listen to his reasoning.
Number in space, and astronomy was number in space and time. That makes a kind of sense, right? Or at least that's how Europeans have traditionally thought of it. There was this concentrated push in 1960s Cold War America to make the language of music theory more like a hard science and less like an art, to return it to the mathematical purity of the quadrivium.
From this harmony in numbers developed the musical scale of
there was a thing that happened in the 20th century where they decided to re-look at music through a scientific mathematical sense, but not the way that the Greeks did. Because the way the Greeks did, thinking intervallically and musically, musical math is completely different than the physics of music, which is grounded in math. And the thing is like, I need to continue.
Composer theorist Milton Babbitt would try and make testable statements about musical compositions, and Benjamin Boritz took that a step further and attempted to use formal logic to make meaningful musical statements. Not sure if he succeeded.
These are some of the things. I mean, I as well get irritated with certain philosophers who go too far with their math. It's like what I was saying. I was just saying it yesterday on a podcast with Flip that Wittgenstein tries to get like this with language, and it gets to a point where like you're trying a little bit too hard to.
Let's first of all, let's talk about Milton Babbitt. No one's going to deny Milton Babbitt was a genius. I believe he was a code breaker in World War II, and he was kind of like John Nash mind, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then he liked that. He said it like Milton Babbitt, this musical theorist. You should say Milton Babbitt, freaky math genius mind.
And there's a lot of minds in philosophy that did this. A lot of the logical positives,
Not to
all
mention,
the way down this road about language, trying to.
It's funny because Milton Babbitt is so atonal, and actually, my wife Emily loves Philomel. It's this piece he wrote in the '60s using a lot of.
You're
new
straight
technology.
too?
Huh?
Why am I? You're straight too? I'm not. Why am I listening to you? Straight white male.
No. Yeah.
Succeeded, but that does look impressive, I guess.
The Pythagoreans.
It does look impressive, I guess.
Their mathematical formula came the basis of our music of today.
The push to make music theory more and more objective had the effect of erasing any trace that it ever had a white European cultural perspective.
Music theory is objectifying music. He just said something that didn't make sense to me. Trying to make music theory objective. That's the point of music theory.
Yeah. But
he's saying
they tried to do it even harder when they went super deep into that.
This is where we get into arguments all the time with other people, where it's like, I'm not claiming, that Beethoven's music is objectively the best music because I have opinions. It's because if you analyze it, there's a lot of really cool things going on there.
Yeah, there's difficult concepts that make
the overall form.
Beyond the difficult form and giant ideas that circle back into each other and you know, continued motifs and building on motifs and all that sorts of idea. But then he had the second level of it connected. It appealed to a lot of people too. So beyond just like making the math all work, he also hit something that resonated, you know, and part of the objectivity of that is how much it resonated with people. Part of, you can say this got popular not just because it was forced down people's throats, it's because it's popular because it resonates with large amounts of people.
I mean, you
can find a quantifiable number of people who say that sounds good.
2020 was his 250th birthday, and
literally
so many concerts were canceled because of COVID.
He was all right. You
know, it's just like we're still talking about him though.
Because
do we just really talk about people that were just all right?
And these guys still.
After all, how can mathematics have a cultural perspective? It's just math.
Is math.
The postmodernists try to go at math the same exact way. These guys were wanting to act like it's different than they go after math the exact same way.
People who want to believe in race neutrality, they want to believe in a colorblind society.
Yep.
Why do you always have to make it about race? Stop
You're the one
talking
bringing it
about
into
race so much. It's not about race. It's just about good music. There's only two kinds of music: good music and bad music.
He's really evaluated those claims.
That is kind of impossible to do because different cultures, ethnicities, and races might value different things in music.
Why?
Well,
is it based on their race made them value a different thing? Like, you guys better start sorting out the objectivity between the races right there. You guys are making a race essentialist claim right there, which even the critical race theories try to argue that in a different way, a structural determinism way. But you guys are making a race essentialist claim right there. You get that?
He's not wrong about certain elements though. That different cultures are going to think things sound different or better or good. But here's the thing: going to school, for me, the first shocking element was the push for atonality was so fast, right? Well, he says that it depends on the thing. You know what you can also do? You can listen to so much atonal music and learn to like it, and then all of a sudden your brain's different. You know what I mean? Like, so you will have a different, you know, perspective on what sounds good.
Does it alter the world for you? Do you just become like a big different thing walking through the world?
And also might not agree on what music actually is. Dr. Kofi Agawu points this out in his paper on the West African bell pattern. Imagine, if you will, a New World Order in which African approaches to rhythm pedagogy predominated in the American Academy. No one would be granted a music degree who could not dance.
So that's the funny thing. And he's trying to make a claim that in their culture,
we have
you have to be able to dance.
In the world of conducting, like you would not be granted a conducting degree unless you're able to keep those different, like, but that's almost like a dance. Like you I think they have to like show that they can do the different timing on two different hands at once. That's basically nearly dancing.
What's the claim he's making though? That every composer should also be able to do a waltz?
No, he's making the claim that if our world was centered around their concept of music, every single music theorist graduate would have to prove their dancing ability, or they wouldn't be good music.
So it would be a general that you'd have to take. So what? And everybody would take it. And just like everyone that I know who take music classes outside of their main focus, they're just getting it out of the way. They don't care.
They get it down well enough to show that.
Or they get a B. They could do the, they didn't really do the dance that great. See, that's how they'd have to do it.
So yeah, I certainly would not be able to graduate from this.
Yes, you would. Like, if you're able to do music, if you're able to time your fingers like that, you might not ever look like a great dancer, but you'd probably get well enough. Just like all sorts of music theorist graduates don't really play that well, or even have that good of music. But to get a degree, to be able to show that you can do the dance, I'm more than positive
you could do it. Like,
everybody could like practice it for a year and get it down well enough that you get
every music teacher has to take teaching classes on how to teach music specifically, and they get familiarized with the 4 families of instruments. So, for example, Jeff Anderson, he knows how to play the violin a little bit, the cello a little bit. He also knows how to play the trumpet a little bit. Not good on any of them, but he can explain to you exactly what they do, because as a music teacher, he had to learn that. And I guarantee if they introduced a dance element to the U, Jeff Anderson would have been up there to complete his degree, learning how to dance and never being able to do it very well because he's not talented.
He would have gotten it done well enough to get past that
to pass
that minor degree.
This academy,
especially I'm sure out of that culture, because I bet you their dancing techniques and all that sorts of stuff don't have some sort of super like Beethoven level specific moves that you have to do or you're out.
It feels kind of off, right? But for a West African musician, that might just be kind of common sense. Dance is essential.
It's common sense, but at the same time too, part of what we're saying in music theory, part of why music theory can be done that way is it's all there. It's all there for any person, for those West Africans to go learn. It's all there. They can learn it.
Look at any performance by a great pianist. They're not just sitting still, and there's natural movements they're making. The music's taking over.
But there's a whole flip end of this too, that they're making this assumption out of probably you two elitist Ivy League school graduates that your dumb degrees matter in any way, shape, or form. Like getting a dumb degree in something is never, ever, ever going to translate. You should learn the stuff and learn it inside and out. You can learn it inside and out. Getting a degree could be helpful, but the actual stupid piece of paper that you get, what does that really say? That West African person only needs that Western music degree to use it to then teach inside of that Western music degree system, like you guys, you guys see yourselves as doing. You guys are pedagogists who want to teach the stuff, so you need to go through that stuff to be more teachers of the stuff.
I mean,
if you're talking in the world of applying it, of those guys applying their dancing, their music, you doing your music, ultimately, how many degrees somebody who actually puts together a big dumb symphony, not big dumb, but a big dumb symphony is, nobody's going to say, well, what's his degree? What's his degree? What's his degree in there?
Well, and the thing is, going back to that idea too, it's a 4-year thing. Now I'm looking at this 23 years into it. I'm still learning every day. Like,
but the reason you need it, like, if you were going to go be a professor or a teacher or anything like that, you're going to need this stuff because if you're being a pedagogist, somebody who's teaching it, you're going to need to know the language and the traditions and the histories to teach it. That's all there is to it. People are going there to get a degree on teaching it or how to teach it and how to know and read it. And you're bitching that doing that is a problem because that's the thing that they're going to do. It doesn't make any sense.
Understanding the layered metric structure of many African styles, and it can also help with performance. This is backed by neuroscience. Studies show that body awareness and movement is essential for how all humans perceive metric structures. Embodied cognition of music is at the very foundation of rhythmic and musical understanding in humans.
We have dance majors.
So why wouldn't dance be required of every musician? Like, seriously, why don't we do that?
Go start a school and do it.
Philosopher Robin James calls
it's racist.
It's cultural appropriation.
Intentional separation of analysis from culture, the epistemology of ignorance.
The practice that naturalizes...
I still have yet to see how he's proving music isn't universal.
The common sense intuition of the most privileged members of society,
like these Ivy League graduate Schniggleditzes here,
as objective knowledge.
We see the separation of analysis and culture in popular media all the time. Like, for example, when conservative pundit Ben Shapiro explains why, in his estimation, hip-hop is not music.
In my view, and the view of my music theorist father who went to music school, there are 3 elements.
See, and I love Shapiro, but I have many complaints with some of his musical analysis.
Yeah, he's a tight-ass, stringent nerd about it.
Harmony, there is melody, and there is rhythm. Okay. And rap only fulfills one of these, the rhythm section. And so it's not actually a form of music, it's a form of rhythmic speaking.
This argument is actually
Yeah, I think that's a crap argument.
It is.
Shapiro.
Very old. It echoes a 1918 article entitled Jazz and Jazzism, which rails against the dangers of jazz.
Jazz is the brotherhood of those who, devoid of harmonic and even of melodic instinct, love to fairly wallow in noise. It is a manifestation of a low streak in man's taste that has not yet come out in the civilization's wash.
I'll take that as a badge of honor. Now, we could show that Black American music like jazz and hip hop do indeed use melody and harmony, but we don't even need to do that to show that Ben Shapiro's argument isn't great. Let's say, hypothetically,
So let's say, for the sake of argument,
there's a Ben Shapiro in a society that framed African ideas of music as objective knowledge. In this case, his...
But Ben Shapiro's not the...
He's not in a musical authority to be talking about.
Exactly.
But that's the thing. It's like
he's Ben Shapiro.
He has to attack a conservative,
This
right?
music
He has to
theorist
bring
thought-
conservatism into this
Do
summit.
you want to know who bitched about jazz? Big time jazz, hated jazz?
Who?
Theodore Adorno. Do you know who Theodore Adorno is? He has papers on, I think he called it, what did he call it? Oh, I forget the exact term of it, but he has a paper, just the long extensive paper about jazz is just a complete shitty thing that is nowhere near to the level of the classical music. Theodore Adorno is the guy who wrote the concept that everybody has of what fascism is nowadays, that like anything on the right is fascism, that comes from Theodore Adorno. He's from the critical school. He's from the Frankfurt School. He was the one who even like wrote out, he called himself a psychologist and wrote out the concept that authoritarianism is automatically a right-wing thing, that there's no such thing as left-wing authoritarianism.
Yeah, left-wing authoritarianism.
He's famous for that. He wrote this thing called the Dialectics of the Enlightenment. He called jazz music an American invention that was part of the capitalistic system that pulls in and meshes in and destroys and takes out the soul of everything. This is a left-wing dude. Adorno hated jazz music, and he is one of the King Kong kings of being leftist and pointing out that everything that isn't leftist is fascism. And he's one of the definitely on the genealogy, one of the tree of all these critical theories. Critical race theory comes from critical theory. He invented critical theory that got turned into critical race theory. Theodore Adorno, direct grandfather of critical race theory, hated jazz music.
Other who went to music school
went to the kind of music school that Kofi Agawu described. In this case, Ben Shapiro would not consider Bach chorales to be music because you couldn't dance to them. Dance is an essential quality of music, as everybody knows, as neuroscience proves. And so Bach chorales objectively are not music. Argument doesn't really make sense. It's a bad argument, but it's no worse than Ben's 100-year-old racist view on Black music.
Much to my
100-year-old racist view.
Where did that
he
come
just
from?
suddenly like adds in this concept into it that
He's a racist view against the music. Well, you know, if you're going to really analyze it and stuff, rap is probably more about the words than the music.
yeah.
And then if you were to look at half of the words, I mean, I don't know what their messages are, but
1930s, Adorno began by denying that jazz had any of the qualities for which it is praised. It was not expensive and spontaneous. Rather, he thought it was formulaic, banal, and worst of all, fashionable. That's what the paper is called, fashion, perennial fashion. That's what it was called. And why did Adorno hate jazz music? I'm telling you, this guy is a direct lineage father of critical race theory. So we could have done this whole little section. Shapiro is definitely a schniggelditz about it. But you could have done this whole section about one of the fathers of critical race theory, or a grandfather of it. Adorno had the same racist
disappointment. There are still people in music theory, I wouldn't say who are white supremacist adjacent. They still believe
That's
it.
still better than they
know
say, because like anytime these like academics do this sorts of stuff, they'll say white supremacist adjacent, but then you just give them like a year or two and they'll take the adjacent out. Because this used to be called, for 10 years ago, they called it white hegemonic. They didn't want to use the word white supremacist. And then after a while, they go white supremacist adjacent. Then after a while, they take adjacent. They have this treadmill of circling around the thing.
This is funny. I've watched the videos of Dr. Peterson talking about how it slowly creeps in.
Yeah.
One word at a time.
And they have it written in their theories to do that,
Here's
to
the
slowly
thing.
move into the...
So one of the elements of music that atonality gets rid of is modulation. It's my favorite thing. Do you know the best way to modulate is to add an accidental each measure? So if you're trying to get to D flat from C, you're going to want to start adding a flat per measure. And then it creeps in and all of a sudden you're in D flat and it doesn't sound like this giant shift, right? And so they've gotten rid of tonality in music completely to modulate ideas the way music modulates.
Yeah, you're pointing
keys.
to how like stuff figured out how to deconstruct music. Yeah, is the same way they're deconstructing all the cultural ideas.
You can't say it.
You'll very often see articles where Western music theory is framed as a tool for proving a piece of music's worth. That piece that we checked out at the beginning.
Worth, it's like it's proving it's intelligent, that it has extra intelligence in it.
Yeah,
Lady Gaga.
I mean, of course, I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of ranking music and musicians.
Myself, I can like all sorts of music that doesn't get that wild into it and don't think about it in that way. But any single time somebody does do something that has that stuff added into it intentionally extra and it's complicated, you stop and go, wow, that's some especially if the song still sounds good. Like one of the things like Radiohead, their first couple albums, they were really good, but it was just kind of general rock. Then they get to like OK Computer and they have the song Paranoid Android. One of the things about Paranoid Android is they added 4 different timings in it, and it has all these like these key changes, well, these musical things and these voice leading things they were purposely trying to get creative. They were not just creative. They were trying to say, hey, look, I can try to do a little bit of stuff too. But the fact that the song can do all those things that are a little bit more intense, but then still hit popularly, that's always impressive to me. Like it's impressive because like there's this thing that happens. The Dire Straits have gotten more and more intense, and the guy's really good at music. And as they've gotten more and more intense, nobody hears them anymore.
Oh, yeah,
nobody hears the stuff.
No, I mean,
and as bands get more and more prog, I mean, there's super respect and super impressive to me and all that sort of stuff. But then it appeals to less people. But anytime you see a pop song that remained popular and you saw them work in something complicated into it, you stop and go, wow, that's pretty cool that they did that. You know,
I've been looking at this with a couple of my earlier works where now that I know how to notate, I have like my earlier works 4/4, 3/4, 5/4, and then all of a sudden it's in a 6/8. And then, you know, when you're young and you're talented and you're not very well informed or educated, you're going to run on instinct. And so there's 2 ways to approach it. Radiohead clearly knew everything and then went, we're going to create something interesting.
They made a rock on instinct, and then they tried to add in a level of extra theory to it, which made it so they could do a more complicated thing.
Exactly.
Paranoid Android, the awesome song that it is, wouldn't exist if those guys who had like good rock sensibility didn't stop and say, hey, I'm going to look a little bit of theory here.
Exactly.
We wouldn't have that song.
Well, we wouldn't. But then also, like, there's the other guy that I like on YouTube who talks about music a lot. He's a younger guy. He likes to cover a lot of things in rock, interesting chords in rock.
British dude?
Huh?
British dude?
No, it's not the British dude. Me and Matt have shown him to you. But anyway, maybe he's British. But he points out like intros with changing rhythms.
Yeah, he's a British dude.
Oh yeah, and then
I like that dude.
And then every time he points out, though, it must have been a thing of instinct. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The reason why it changed meter was instinctual, or how the Beatles in Lucy in the Sky changed meters.
Yeah, I think it is the British dude. He's a.
Oh yeah, he's British. I know. Yeah,
David Bennett piano. Yeah,
I love David Bennett. He's awesome.
He's got really good stuff.
This practice to the work of Henrik Schenker, who used his theories of analysis in the early 20th century as a means of identifying genius in the works of Beethoven and Bach.
And Jimmy
which
DeMann.
means
he admits.
That's right, everybody. It's time to talk about
Schenker
part 5,
wanted
7.
to identify genius.
I hate these parts. They're like, oh, you're showing your over education of showing these musical theory.
He's like,
numbers.
here, let's talk about Schenker and talk about Schenkerian analysis, which is pretty obscure and not the main focus of music theory. Music theory's main focus is probably Roman numeral analysis, which I said earlier, mostly I got from Walter Piston. In fact, it was invented in the early 18th century and was ignored by Schenker and Schoenberg and Bruckner. Bruckner taught at Viennese school, and he was aware of Roman numerals, though. He just didn't teach them. So all of these musicians, Schoenberg is a genius too. They were aware of Roman numeral analysis and stuff, but they didn't use it too much. It wasn't until, I don't know if it was Walter Piston, but his book Harmony really brought back the Roman numeral system. And I'll tell you something. I mean, hell, he's even using it there, part 5/7, B9.
Yeah,
or
but
flat
he's being
9.
ironic in his parts.
Flat
But
9.
also trying to flex on how that he knows the stuff.
9, sharp 9, flat 13.
Heinrich
Schenker, I guess.
Ironically,
Heinrich Schenker, I guess.
If Beethoven is our
Even if he's
exemplar
the
for a
biggest
music
racist prick on the planet, you can't say also he did something good.
composer, Schenker
So,
is
like-
our exemplar for a music theorist.
Heinrich Schenker,
He's our exemplar.
1868 to 1935, arguably the most influential music theorist in American music theory.
So in the United States,
No, Walter Piston.
you want to get a graduate degree in music theory. I know there are tens of you. You got to study the theories of Heinrich Schenker.
Were you given Schenker in college?
Schenkerian analysis is something that he's not doing a good job at saying this. If you want to be a music theorist, and I think you had to take, as a composition major, I had to take higher level theory courses on form and Schenkerian analysis, but those aren't music theory 1 through 4. Okay, Schenkerian analysis takes a whole symphony and gives you sections of it in blocks, stacks the notes on top of each other, sections of melody, how it connects. But it's like a super shorthand that even Schenker himself struggled to understand.
American music theory has very deep Schenkerian roots.
Oh my gosh, they said that like it's a white supremacist roots because Schenker himself
Schenkerian roots
had his white supremacist ways. You drop those terms like they know the bull crap insinuation they're making.
Carson Berry traces the popularity of Schenker's ideas of music in America for a desire in the 1930s for more objective musical criticism, which bears more than a little similarity to pop culture think pieces, which appeal to the supremacy of
These associations, man. It's all associating. It's associating,
that right
associating.
there.
3 steps removed to create this BS.
That's just somebody said
smear.
it that way. Somebody said somebody said the supremacy of the rules of Western music theory. Who said it was supreme? It just really good way of analyzing things, so people use it.
Of the rules,
the popularity is the supremacy.
Rules of Western music
Yeah,
theory
well.
today. They're both born from Schenkerian ideals.
He came
Oh
up
my, they're born of white supremacist ideals. I didn't say that. You're saying that.
with ideas about how the structure of music theory plays out, from a background structure to then a middle ground structure and a foreground structure. So this background structure came in only a couple of varieties. It essentially had a motion from a tonic to a dominant to a tonic chord that could play out in 2 bars, or it could play out in 200 bars or 500 bars in a movement by Beethoven or Mozart.
Schenkerian analysis has a unique form of musical notation that attempts to identify the deep structure of what Schenker considered the great works of tonal music, what Schenker called the ersatz, the sound of scale degree 3 resolving to scale degree 2 resolving to scale degree 1. In other words, at the fundamental level, all great works of music are 3 blind mice. This is a bit of an oversimplification, but honestly, not that much.
He had a very short list of great composers.
You're a blind mice.
Half blind.
James has eye problems, which should make him be able to use that as an ableist reason why they should put his music at the forefront of everything. But
I mean, I've thought about it over the years. How much do I use my cornea transplants and losing my eye as a sob story? And weirdly enough, I'm going to discuss it before the string quartet, but I'm going to discuss it in a setting of like, it pissed me off. It always just got in the way of writing. You know, I'm not going to, it's like, oh, poor me.
Of course, all white men. They were 11. I think some people say 12 in number. All German speaking except for 2, Chopin, who was a Pole, and Domenico Scarlatti, who was Italian.
If you want to learn Schenkerian analysis,
My name is Dr. Jacob Graham.
I highly recommend Dr. Jacob Grand's videos on YouTube. They're a clear and concise introduction to a very complicated subject that might help you better understand the works of tonal composers.
Yeah, well,
I 100%.
Schenker was obsessed with the background, foreground, all that stuff, right? And then what's like basically,
I watched some of that to figure out some of the no rules of parallel fifths and stuff like that.
he's trying to find the cosmic background of the universe in music with every composition.
Recommend these videos. They are great.
He drew heavily on 18th century theories of melody.
When you watch these videos, though, you start to realize that the concept of figured bass is absolutely essential in understanding Schenkerian analysis, as well as the idea of continuo. It becomes clearer.
So that's why you had to say it was pointless.
Why there is figured
Because you
bass
need no figured bass to understand Schenker.
everywhere in all of our music theory textbooks. It's because it's all a system designed.
So they want to cut out Schenker, just like we want to keep the ability to analyze music and cut out the guy who did it because he had some supremacist thoughts.
To teach.
He's German supremacist too. That's one of the issues of it. It's like they keep bringing these things up. It's like these are German supremacists, not the Ku Klux Klan.
Schenkerian ideas from the ground up. It's actually
these German supremacists were just as supremacists to you and me as they were to any the people we like and think they're really, really great. They're German supremacists. They would have thought the Irish and the French were bags of shit as well.
Pretty explicit in the preface to this book, Harmony and Voice Leading. This book reflects the theoretical and analytic approach of Henrik Schenker. The book will provide valuable preparation for the later study of Schenkerian analysis. The problem is that
for the later study. So everything you're going to learn first is probably stuff Piston helped perfect, which is the fundamentals, going through Roman numeral analysis. I do believe Piston was the person who theoretically discovered the secondary dominant. So that's a pretty cool thing too.
I figured that out myself. I'm just kidding, I didn't.
Is not useful in understanding any other style of music besides Western classical music. You can't do Schenker to Meshuggah, for example.
No,
that's because it's, but also he's there to study stuff that has layers and layers and layers upon it. You're not going to use Schenker because that layer, the layer is not there.
Schenkerian analysis also goes into a piece that's like, say, a sonata, 3 sections, okay, in multiple keys, modulating all the time.
Yeah, you don't. The layer isn't there. Those layers aren't there to analyze.
Yeah, well, so what you'll see in a Schenkerian analysis is a whole symphony on one bar, and it'll say it's in this key, and it basically, I mean, it's not lying. It basically does 3 blind mice in the A section in this key. Then in the B section, when we break it down, it does 3 blind mice. You know, he finds the 1 and 5 chord a lot. You know, in the big scheme of things. I saw a video where a person said a modern sonata is a modern rock song, and the modern rock song follows an ABA format with certain changes, and sometimes there's key. The big thing about sonatas, key changes, but
everything you're saying is stuff that's not needed to analyze these mega, probably more closer to white supremacists.
If you did a Schenkerian analysis on any pop song, it would come up with is one giant expression of the tonic.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, whereas the symphony is going to express
it takes you one
tonic.
sentence. It takes you a sentence, and you could call it Schenkerian. But also that sentence, you didn't need Schenker to make that sentence. You know, you say it's the song's based around one tonic. That's it. You know.
Or James Brown, or Anuja Kamat's music. And even within the Western canon, Schenker does not do a very good job of explaining rhythm or timbre or any other musical element. Dance, if we're going to adopt the African worldview.
Well, yeah, but you just said that book was going to teach you all that stuff for the later use of he said that, right? Schenkerian analysis, he says, doesn't do a good job at explaining rhythm. And all. You just said before you get to it, you got to learn everything in this big giant book.
We've built music theory from the very ground up with the idea that the only music worth analyzing and worth having a language
you keep extrapolating this stuff
of analysis for is the music that this mustache like.
They are doing the reification fallacy. It's you're going to come up with every single argument that tries to hold up your abstract concept that is just your base assertion, and you're coming up with stuff, and you make these jumps. Everywhere is a jump to hold up that abstract.
As music through his theories, then it isn't music. It's not worthy of your time. It's inferior. You can't do music theory to it.
That's Schenker, not people who use Schenker in their music theory.
The legacy of Ben Shapiro and his
music theorist.
Shapiro and his dad are numbnuts. I mean, as far as music goes.
Who went to music school,
Western music.
But I think there's even something in Shapiro's description right there that he's saying that he knows that that's just their preference. In his tone and in what he's saying, what he's pointing at is that their preference of style. You know.
Theory has developed a language that attempts to show white culture superiority over non-white cultures under the guise of objective analysis. It's all a system designed to show white supremacy over non-white culture. And if you think that's me being hyperbolic or speculative, no, that's exactly what Schenker set out to do with his theory of music.
He said very explicitly, I think of music like I think of people. I have a unified worldview. There's a hierarchy. White people are at the top. There's a hierarchy. The foreground is at the top.
No, he didn't say white people at the top. He said geniuses were.
Also,
the Germans are at the top, and it's you guys who use that construct to fit it into your little worldview you're trying to create here and call it white.
The 11 or 12 composers are clearly at the top, and then he always used the word genius. Genius was code for white. It was also code for German.
What?
In his essay, Schenker the Regressive,
They add that white.
They just said that.
the conductor Leon Botstein would write,
The fact that Schenker, an observant and active member of
Just
official-
whatever sort of contortion you need to make to fit it into your critical race theory world. This is why I say it's sophistry. It's ultimately sophistry because you start with a conclusion. It's the opposite of what you're supposed to be doing in college. The opposite of what music theorists did when discovering music, which was you don't start with a conclusion, you start with observations and then slowly try to make things fit inside of those observations and testing different things and poking at different things until you circle down around something that seems to hold true. And then for as long as it seems to hold true, it's called a theory. Although if it gets busted out by anything else that becomes a superior theory, that takes over. That's the concept of the scientific worldview, the Enlightenment worldview. These guys start with the end in mind, and then they try to fit everything into it. It's the same way. It's sophistry.
Confirmation bias, basically.
Yeah.
religious Viennese Jewish community adhered to these views and propagated them indicates how deep-seated was the sense of German cultural superiority within German-speaking Europe and how widely it was internalized.
So the most controversial part is not saying that Schenker praised Hitler in a letter to his pupil Felix Eberhard von Kuba in May of 1933, 4 months after.
These are things that you don't even need to know about Schenker. Like, you could just leave that out of the curriculum entirely, but you guys are going to make sure to add it in because you want to try to smear, to paint up a picture of your category error of saying because that guy had some racist thoughts, his objective work around certain things of categorizing things now must be called into question as included in white supremacy. Sophistry.
I said it to the
It's like nobody's gonna argue that we had a German supremacy problem throughout the 20th century.
Yeah.
But
you guys are adding on that construct to white about it. Germans were white, but they were supremacists. We fought a whole giant war where millions and millions and millions of youngsters died.
Again, that white people, millions of white people went to fight the white people.
It's not that Schenker said the Jews are the greatest enemies to Germany, and he was Jewish himself. It's not that he said even Negroes think that they can govern themselves. No, it's not that he said these horrible things that the white race must annihilate.
Yes, that stuff has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with the evaluations of music.
Japanese animals because they're Japanese. No, it's not that he said all of those things.
Or the descriptions of the music.
No one's going to dispute that. That's all out there.
Carl Schachter, the guy who co-wrote this harmony textbook that we keep referencing, wrote that for Schenker, both his political and musical ideas were armaments in a cultural struggle that would eventually lead to a regeneration of both music and society at large in the German-speaking world.
I think that's kind of a making sure that they're making a white supremacy contextual framing of that little sentence right there. I bet you he dug through that book to find that little snippet right there to make that little snippet seem as bad as possible.
What was that music?
Ooh, okay, now things are getting serious. Music
No, they aren't. They are not.
theory's intellectual framework is built on Germany's cultural struggle of the 1930s. That's good. Carl Schachter continues. Schenker.
Oh my gosh, it's got like an original sin on it. It should be baptized. It should be.
Did he just come to this conclusion himself? That's the funny thing.
No. This whole entire video, I guarantee he didn't sit there around this. Like, he's been taught this stuff from somewhere else. Somebody else has been pushing these whole entire. He probably took this class from that guy and got that stuff all put together. And that guy is standing on the shoulders of other guys because all these people do is sit around all day and try to figure out any possible construal they could to fit into their. And I guarantee this guy didn't sit down to make this video real quick to do it. The only credit I'll give him is his ability to quickly edit together a thing with all these different videos, which must have been a difficult, hard thing to do. But other than that, no, this is not Adam Neely. It's Adam Neely regurgitating something he's been taught somewhere.
I believe that.
Well, that's what I mean. He's acting like it's this. I mean, when he does that, he's like, "Woo, okay." So now it comes out of this. It's like
Of some sort,
You're the
at
one
least in
who
cultural
made
matters,
it.
not also in political structure, would promote the selection and support of gifted individuals among whom the rare genius might emerge.
Look at that music in the background. The music
Oh,
in
the
the
music-
background is so demonizing.
See, now I want to look at this. Why is this white? Schenker believed there's an
It's German. It's German supremacy.
Well, yeah, but let's break it down. What is that aristocracy he's talking about? He's talking about all the people you see on music rooms.
Yeah.
Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, and Chopin. Okay, he wanted it to be a world to promote the selection and support of gifted individuals among whom the rare genius might emerge. Now, he's talking about a system that a gifted person could flourish in, and he's decided that is in the counterpoint and harmony that Germany. I mean, look, he's not doing a very good job. In music history, we learned that basically the ideas of music was a war between the Italians who invented music, supposedly, or harmony, discovered harmony, and versus the Germans and the way they used it. Germans like to use very much counterpoint, and the Italians like homophonic sounds. Vivaldi sounds different than Bach. I love Vivaldi, I love Bach. But yeah, we learned that there was like kind of a struggle between Italians and Germans. Even in Amadeus, which every musician is like, I love the movie, but they always have to follow it up with, even though it's historically inaccurate. Yeah. It's like always like, it's like, look, it's a good movie. And the parts that they got historically accurate was the timing of the works. And yeah, Mozart says it. No, the Italians, there was a thing between Germans and Italians in Vienna.
That he was altogether wrong in this last view, I'm not prepared to say. Wait a second. Shacker agrees with Schenker. Are music theorists...
Shacker's saying...
He didn't say that, he just agreed with him right there.
He's saying, I don't know if I can disagree. This system might actually be the system.
He's talking about the system, but this guy's, he's doing the thing of painting the picture that Shacker agrees with all of Schenker's ideas that he ever had. The smear tactic, guilt by association, completes bullcrap.
That system that he's talking about that he can't fully disagree with, he can't because it seems to be a system that has actually given us great minds.
But he's talking about the musical system right here, and these guys are doing everything they can to not to fudge that and make it sound like he's agreeing with Schenker's views on Jews. Smear tactics, bullcrap, Adam Neely.
Theory like a...
Our roots are white supremacist.
Where's the word adjacent? It's already gone in this video.
We have created racist policies based on that simple racist idea.
Yeah, that's critical race theory.
Dr. Ewell is not the first person to suggest that ignoring Schenker's racist ideas is not an option. Leon Botstein would also say in his essay,
Schenker's notion,
his racist ideas. So like now that's just attached to that right now. When that idea was an idea about systems of music, that wasn't his idea about Jews. You guys melded those together in your sneaky associative ways.
Of superior culture as an instrument for civilizing the rest of the world, when placed in the context of such forceful prejudices and contempt, demands scrutiny.
I have taught Schenkerian analysis. I know it very well.
Oh, so you're associated with it. No, he's associated with it. He's taught some of it. He's taught the white supremacy. Cancel him.
Always got A's, always liked it. And I completely shoved it all under the carpet for my career. That was a bitter pill for me to swallow. Think of how hard it is for someone to swallow who's invested way more.
So he's apologizing for his white supremacy of it. What? How are you guys not able to, as
what's the hard
supposedly
pill?
Learned adults, understand that the religious or cultural views of a person of a certain time frame might have nothing to do with a certain system that they labeled out that's useful in another way. The person who we don't need to know, the person who invented the wheel, whatever that caveman is, what he thought of another caveman's tribe, that's not going to affect us having the wheel.
More than and there are many. The people who have devoted their careers, their energy, their toil to a field.
It's so hyper moralistic. It's like an OCD hyper type of moralism to seek out and find any sort of way you could be race guilty and to wallow yourself, sit in your filth, just sit in your filth all the time.
Don't want to see it uprooted. They don't want to see their work undone. It's very difficult for that person to look into a mirror and say, race exists.
Oh, it's white fragility.
Whiteness exists.
He said something.
Guess what? If you're for colorblindness, that doesn't mean you don't think race.
Well, yeah, but see, what he just said was there's people who've built their career around this that don't want to be told they're wrong or their work undone. Okay, that to me sounds a lot like a lot of different fields that have to go into activism to stay alive.
They're trying to poison the tree of the fruit of all these different stuff. Say that tree was poisonous, so any sort of fruit that came out of the thing. Well, guess what? All of history is poison. All of history is poison, and we're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Well, that's the thing,
who
though.
Grew up in a poison.
They're proclaiming putting your eggs in a Schenkerian basket's the wrong way. Okay, but I've made this claim. How many brilliant people have I known who put all of their baskets in the atonal side, who believe atonality is superior, who believe atonality is the new future way of music and the way to go? How many geniuses went down that path? I mean, many. Yeah. They were also followed by a lot of mediocre people. And guess what? You can't follow Beethoven, Bach, and Mozart as easily.
We've been rooted in pushing whiteness, and whiteness has had a leg up this whole time. And
so he's just such extrapolations.
Did you see that? There was a perfect modulation. He said whiteness then like went a few sentences,
good.
whiteness, then a few sentences, then it got faster and
Exactly.
faster. Now it's like whiteness,
I like
whiteness,
your concept
whiteness.
of modulation. It's like they're doing the modulations to tone change.
They're adding
It's all modulations
accidental.
to change it, the accidental to change it into full white supremacy, and to change it into full looking on the past, to change it into full complicity guilt of everybody who participates in society in any way, shape, or form. And it's hack. It's hack. It's cringe.
Non-white groups.
It should not be parts of academia. It's sophistry. It's the type of sophistry that should be weeded out of academia.
Who have been greatly disadvantaged.
Part 6 minor. No, really, music theory is really racist.
Greatly disadvantaged. So now it's really racist. So they started out from all the way to the end of it's really racist.
Interviewed Dr. Ewell back in early July, and since that interview took place, there has been some, shall we say, music theory that has happened. After his speech at SMT, the Journal of Schenkerian Studies at the University of North Texas published 15 papers and symposium response that Dr. Ewell was not invited to participate in. Now, some of these papers were half-assed.
Why would he be invited to participate in it? He's just like a random-ass professor, you know?
Well, I mean, so he finds this one professor, but the funny thing is like, I guarantee, if I remember right, anybody who criticizes his ideas are instantly put in the racist white supremacy category,
to say the least. One was just a short paragraph, and one was somehow.
And one of the main persons who's criticized him is John McWhorter, who is a black man. I've just used a black man. I've appropriated the black man. That's like me using blackface by using a black man to say it because of all these guys' bullshit construal.
Published anonymously, which is strange because, you know, just ask any teacher if that's enough to get a passing grade on an assignment. You're going to need to write your name on it, and you're going to need to probably write more than one paragraph. Probably the
That doesn't make any sense. It's not being submitted as like a scholarly.
worst offender in laziness, though, comes from a professor at the University of North Texas named Timothy Jackson, who quotes at length from the Wikipedia article on misogyny in rap music for some reason. I guess because Dr.
For some reason, it doesn't matter. Like, they can go off forever and ever about Schenker's ideas, but you can't talk about the misogyny.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. But I mean, he's going to make fun of Wikipedia here. And I swear I've seen him use Wikipedia multiple times.
And Wikipedia has become completely ideologically aligned with his worldview anyway, so he shouldn't be so hard.
And white accuses Dr. Ewell of black anti-Semitism and also of not bringing blacks up to standard, and also patronizingly dismisses the work of black musicians.
We can listen to their music with pleasure, even if they aren't the supreme geniuses on the level of the greatest classical composers.
It's mostly an unhinged racist tirade, but more importantly, this guy quoted from Wikipedia, like at length. I don't even do that, and I make YouTube videos. Seriously, check the sources and the link in the description. There are a lot of them, and none of them are Wikipedia. Like, not to belabor this point, but can you imagine citing Wikipedia in a term paper or a thesis or dissertation? Like, does your teacher let you do that? Like, no.
They now let you do that. It's been pretty common use now that they said that Wikipedia is now allowable in term paper.
I mean, yeah, we can go and check it. We can go and check all of his references.
But I agree, Wikipedia shit. It's complete. It's got complete ideological control over it.
Well, and I also agree. If that guy said it that way, even their music's still good, even if it's not the supreme geniuses. It's like,
but none of that says that any black person couldn't go be a supreme genius working in that other type of.
Well, that's what I mean. Think about it. Like, it's really silly. I know we always bring up Scott Joplin, and it's like it's so rare, but you gotta also take into consideration people's individual tastes.
Yeah, what's that guy gonna say about country music? What's he gonna say about it?
Yeah,
is he gonna call country music at the level of the supreme genius of these Germans? He's not gonna call.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. You could say classical music isn't this world that lets minorities in, but you could also say classical music's not that appealing to minorities, let alone to most people in today's modern world anyway.
But that's part of the thing that they try to make the claim is that appeal, because the cultures view stuff is different, and that's why it views that culture as the supreme culture, because it's got a more intense taste in harmonics.
You don't do that, dude. Why the hell would we take you seriously? People were pissed and signed a letter that Timothy Jackson should probably be held to the same level of academic competence that high schoolers are, and also maybe not be such a racist douchebag personally to Dr. Ewell. And for some reason, Fox News decided that this would be part of the culture war now, as well as the National Review, who described Timothy Jackson's paper as
serious critique of that scholar's work, based on archival research within his highly specialized field, and after lifelong study of Schenker specifically, and music theory more generally.
Again, Wikipedia. The very first thing that you see when you type in, is Wikipedia a reliable source, is Wikipedia telling you that it is not a reliable source. Man, Timothy Jackson, you're just killing it, dude. Just killing it.
I heard the quote where blacks have to, you got to raise blacks up to standard so they can.
I always hate how condescending they get. Like,
oh my God.
It's like you're watching them get joy, and then maybe in this video,
yeah, if any sort of idiot like professor like that goes and says something generally boneheaded, it's joy to the world for them because they got proof. They they found something that's going to be something they can accumulate into their abstracted world.
Yeah, and it's like you're watching their little
and they
Schadenfreude.
sheer joy. There's sheer joy in it. Like there's sheer look. We've been proven right. That guy said an idiotic thing.
You couldn't even say that in like 1970.
So the unfortunate side effect of the cartoonish levels of racism coming out of the University of North Texas this month is that this whole thing has turned into a referendum on Heinrich Schenker, who, one, you probably just heard of today, and two, was just some racist anti-Semitic guy living in Europe at the turn of the 20th
and that's
century.
what's
And
funny.
let's be honest, he
is most people just heard of Schenker. They didn't go to music school. You already stated multiple times you have to know a bunch about music theory to even learn Schenkerian analysis.
And then there's probably people who learned Schenkerian analysis and didn't sit and spend the time to like learn what his family, his day-to-day life is about. You know?
And we're talking about theorists here. Now, when it comes to it, Schenker liked to compose, Piston composed, but they were mostly theorists. Now, I don't know if they wrote their music that way, though. See, I don't sit down and write music.
But I'm with them
from
too.
theory.
Like, I agree with you, Adam Neely. How about we throw out Adorno and what Adorno said about blacks and their music? And if we throw out everything that stems from the root of Adorno, ooh, you guys are doing it right here today. You guys are associated with it. This critical race theory stuff is associated with Adorno. Oh my
Well, like
gosh.
James Lindsay says, they don't even really hide what critical race theory is, because if you just remove race, it's critical theory.
was not unique in that regard. The fact that Fox News desperately wants to turn this into cancel culture run amok is just stupid.
Phil wants to quote unquote cancel Schenker. I don't, never said it, kind of said exactly the opposite at the end of my long article. Phil wants us to throw away Schubert and never play Schubert anymore. Nope, never said it, wouldn't say it.
You just want us to be all fully aware at all times that we're baiting in white supremacy to further your importance as a critical race theorist.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't doubt that he's been scrutinized and said, hey, you're the guy who said get rid of Schenker. And he's like, I never said that. He didn't, you know, and it's getting blown out of proportion that way. No, but you did suggest that Beethoven was just the guy.
Yeah, but beyond that too is they want people to sit in the filth of Schenker. They want that to be present always because it elevates the necessity of needing critical race theorists to show us this different view of incredibly different concepts that are so different.
Was a very interesting composer. I like quite a bit of his music. It's not about canceling anybody. It's about addressing difficult issues directly, forthrightly. We're going to talk about it openly. We're going to talk about white supremacy, the roots in white supremacy. I mean, that's a statement of fact. It's not under question.
No,
music theory.
It's a statement of critical race theory.
When we talk about critical race theory, would you guys throw a tantrum if we talk about the roots of the concepts of Derek Bell and Derek Bell's, how Derek Bell has a history of being sympathetic with Farrakhan and Farrakhan's views of Jews? And are we going to discuss honestly and openly the truth of the roots of critical race theory? Adorno's view on jazz and jazz musicians, which is pre-critical race theory, but it's one of the things that got married in together. But Derek Bell himself, I mean, that guy, he was for segregation of schools, but you guys are probably for that too. Separate but equal, right?
Well, yeah, but now they're full circle for it. Now they're the ones creating the safe spaces.
Yeah, safe space but equal. Say it's not separate but equal, safe space but equal.
Is historically rooted in white supremacy. The music theorists said it themselves.
This is the other deal of it too, is I think they're the white supremacists. Like they're the ones that they're white supremacists with a conscience.
Well,
You guys are looking at all that stuff with
I saw a comment on one of my Facebook pages. And someone had said the resurgence of neoclassicism in the 19th or the early 20th century is just so stupid because classical music is so easy to write, and you know the new music's so hard. I disagree. It's a lot easier to write in an atonal setting and try and make crazy chords. You're trying to make the craziest chords ever, so
it's really
do it.
It's really hard. You know.
It's really hard.
But beyond that being really hard, not just the classical stuff being really hard, it's incredibly hard, incredibly difficult. I'm nowhere near even, and I'm never even going to try to do it. I don't want to try to. You've told me I should try to do like a whole sonata or something like that, but I don't even want to try to.
I want you to learn a banjo sonata.
Even the jazz guys are. It's hard. It's super. I could play with jazz people, but to whip it out like in a second or something like that and be really good at it, it's a lot of work and there's a lot of understanding of a lot of stuff. And in all these cases, these guys, like those Germans would be themselves as a supremacist to me. But on myself, like I look up and I say that what they were doing was incredibly hard. It doesn't matter what the worldviews were. It just objectively is incredibly hard and difficult to write the source of stuff out. And I even think these guys underestimate. They haven't, because there's somebody who played a line in a symphony that they are anywhere near Beethoven's level. Like, you played the bass line in a symphony, you know what I mean? You didn't write the dumb symphony. Go write the dumb symphony, you know? And
I bet that his work, I'd like to look into his work. It's probably very atonal.
Yeah, because
experimental. You know, I mean,
that's a good way to hide that you can do complex stuff, and we can't really evaluate it because it's atonal.
In the 19th century, quite openly, it wasn't a secret. It only became a secret when white supremacy became untenable in the mid-20th century. You couldn't be white supremacist anymore. It had to go underground.
Part 7.
That's one of the critical race theory ideas, is that we didn't change it. We didn't keep Schenker's work and get rid of Schenker's white supremacist views because we disagreed with white supremacist views. We just didn't want people to see it, and we're just hiding it. So it's a secret hidden thing because we still have the white supremacist
What did
views.
he just say? He's like, and then in the 20th century, it became unfashionable to be white supremacist. Like, he's saying white supremacy has been all the way from back in the day.
It's one of the concepts of critical race theory.
It's sad to me.
Critical race theory is that nothing has changed. It's only been hidden. Nobody disagrees vehemently with Schenker. We're just hiding that we agree.
That's the thing, though. Is like, he needs some Thomas Sowell in his life because he has this view that white supremacy, coda. Yeah, this is
So where do we
coda
begin?
at the end.
Well, the first step is in acknowledging that music theory is profoundly Eurocentric and white racially framed, and we already kind of...
Why? Why?
It's funny because he's like, it is, except for the Indian chick earlier showed us that India came up with the same fundamentals with just a little bit more twanginess.
In the beginning of this video, I asked you to replace the phrase music theory in popular media with the harmonic style of 18th century European musicians, and hopefully that got your wheels turning.
Which is the style.
Now, sometimes
none of this got my wheels turning, Adam Neely, except for trying to figure out how you guys play games. You play that, what did you call it? The
like when I'm composing, it's almost like a Sudoku puzzle. I gotta solve these harmonic puzzles and get
beyond the but when you taught it like the key change, when you're going to the bad key change, the accidentals to move towards
modulation.
Like, the only thing I'm interested in is their modulations. I know like what all their dumb ideas are and their stupid phrases are. A good critical race theory, that's a good word, critical race theorist versus a bad critical race theorist is just better at the modulation. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
They're better at the little incremental, and he just showed here that maybe from his musical school thing across this whole entire 44 minutes, how to slowly modulate and jump categories and associate, make bad associations, and make sure to blend stuff together or separate stuff out when convenient to hold up his abstract.
There's a really funny video of Dudley Moore. He was a great classical pianist, and he's making fun of how Beethoven ends a piece on the piano. And basically, Beethoven did a lot of the creepy modulation stuff, but then at the end, it's just 5-1, 5-1, 5-1, crazy, crazy, crazy. And it goes on for a long time. Well, that's what that thing sounded like with that guy at the end. His white supremacist, like I was saying earlier, crept into where at the end, it was like a Beethoven sonata going 5-1, 5-1. He's just like, white supremacy here, 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 here. And he was saying that word so many times that it's like you wanted to say that from the beginning. You just had to kind of
they had to modulate. They had to modulate. That's a great thing that you came up with there. And then the whole thing that we watched all the way along is the like you said, the accidentals, so that you didn't notice when the full modulation hit, because you saw from the beginning there being, well, there's stuff that seems adjacent to the idea of concept that was rooted back in the time, started out as a way to, we're super racist still right now, and everything's still racist, and that's just what we're doing. And we're just doing that because we're just observing things.
Sometimes people genuinely are not referring to that style when they say music theory, but more often than not, they actually are. There's nothing wrong with the harmonic style of 18th century European musicians. I like the music of Bach. It's a big...
You're saying that there is...
Again...
You're able to separate the style right now? We were always separating the style.
But at the fundamental, you analyze it with those fundamental notes.
I don't know. I'm sure I could probably guess. I do not know what Mozart's view on God was. I don't know what his view on women was. I don't know what his view on climate change was. I don't know. I don't give a crap. I don't ever need to give a crap.
Well, Mozart liked women very much, but as much speculation that there might be, he probably cheated on Constanza.
I don't care.
No, so you don't care, but I do think that he believed in God. He actually thought, I think if you were to ask Mozart his deep rooted, he'd be like, yeah, I think I'm a piece of God, maybe.
Okay, I hate him now. Now I can't listen to any Mozart.
big part of me.
You want to know how James and I think are useful for somebody like you, Adam Neely? Because if I was somebody like you, I'd never be able to listen to any one of your videos again because you're such a dumb shit here. But because your other videos talk about objective things or concepts or interesting ideas of music, I can listen to more of your videos because I'm not an associative dickbag. But you guys are in this whole entire world of wanting to poison this associating with anything that it has these sinful origins of being, I call it like repressive tolerance. Just like I said, we're going to focus on that professor and Ben Shapiro. We're not going to look at Adorno at all, are we? You probably knew Adorno is
you think
one of the, oh yeah, he probably knows that Adorno is famous for that critique of jazz.
See, I was too busy. That's the thing. A lot of the times you're like, you should like read Dostoevsky. You don't, and I was really busy trying to understand Beethoven, Bach, and Mozart. And I thought that I was coming to an education that was pretty awesome doing that, only to find out that the world wants to shit on it.
Yeah.
Does not mean that it has to be the default. The music theory of Henrik Schenker also might be very useful in understanding the music of Bach and Mozart and Beethoven. And honestly, the musical notation looks pretty sweet. That doesn't mean that his worldview has to be the default. And in fact, let's not adopt any of his worldview.
So you acknowledge
this
the
video
music notation of
I
Bach
want to mention a
looks
couple
beautiful.
things that have been
The
glaringly
notation
omitted
itself.
from the script so far.
That's
First,
also pretty
all
cool.
the notation, all the style, all the everything of it is.
I mean,
thing, of course, is
one of the most
music theory
contrapuntal
class.
things I've written is this section
costs money to
here.
go
I
to
want
music
you to
school,
tell
and
me if you look
everybody
at it, can you tell it's counterpoint?
Yeah, I can. I'm just kidding. I can.
No, you can. It's pretty looking notation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, I mean, it looks good. It looks formed.
Yeah.
There's this theory that your music is supposed to also look good on paper. That's the problem with atonal music. An atonal score can be gorgeous as hell.
Music school, the place where you learn this harmonic style of 18th century European musicians. And so knowledge of music theory can be kind of a class signifier. In the United States, anyway, the relationship between class.
I think overall, one of his general things he's trying to show here is that there's much to be learned. A critical race theory thing is going to give you a larger, wider perspective of the whole entire world. I think it just taught you to be a sophist. I think that's all it taught you to do. Because all of these things, all these options, all these items, all these abilities were already there in the liberal perspective worldview, the Enlightenment perspective worldview. We are already integrating these ideas. We already have the options to go into studying any sorts of one of them. Even the dance thing, it was already there before you guys got to this illiberal level of bull crap.
This is what this video's taught me. First came the music, then came the theorists.
No, first came the racism.
True.
That's where it starts. That's actually the claim of critical race theory.
The music gets observed by the theorist, then the critical race theorists observe the theorist of the music. See, it's like this. We're on this third tier of theorizing, if you will.
Yeah.
And we're now at this phase where the people who looked at the music, this one person, by the way, he's ignoring Schoenberg, who was a theorist to himself. He invented atonal music. He invented the 12-tone idea. He's the person who said, let's do what Picasso's doing in art, basically. And he could have picked him, but he probably thinks Schoenberg, rightly so, is a giant of music. He was a genius.
Don't say that word. That's why
that's right. Don't say that word.
I guess you can say it for Joplin. You can say it for
the
Joplin.
G word.
Because I have heard you say it for Joplin. But
class and race is very clear. So this white racial frame of music theory affects class as well. Now, you might notice also that I've been talking about the United States primarily in this video, which is rather ironic in a video about the Eurocentrism of music theory, but I can only personally speak to my experience. And in my experience,
the Eurocentrism that the United States happily adopted and kept going.
The music of Beethoven through the lens of Barry Harris and George Russell, people of color. Instead, I learned figured bass.
It's funny because like we fought those Germans, you know what I mean? And we were able to separate out.
He just said, I didn't learn these, I learned figured bass. You could have. I don't remember there not being a class for everything at the university. My hell, there was even a rock and roll history class.
We were already integrating all of it. It was already there. We already had the pluralism. We were already working on it in the colorblind world.
Schenkerian analysis, which was
the colorblind world does not mean you sophists that we don't understand that there's different.
I guess I don't understand.
We approach stuff on the level of its merit, which we believe in merit, which this might be a whole other.
No, it's a whole other argument. But I guess I don't fully understand then. Is he trying to tell people that at these universities, you're not going to be able to get a full education, because that's not true, because my friend Ryan was a classical guitar major and a jazz guitar major and a classical French horn major and a jazz French horn player and trumpet. He did everything classical and jazz. He was in both classes, and guess what? He blended well. He sounded classical, and then he could sound like jazz. So we had that. There's big band, there's jazz band at the university. It's not as popular as the classical one, but he's the one who showed the statistics. Jazz and classical was at the bottom already. When it comes to music, classical music is already up against the world. You're done.
Yeah.
You're outdated.
Theory explicitly designed to teach German cultural supremacy. I didn't learn the basics of Ottoman or North Indian or Japanese or African music theory as a foil to Western theory, and I certainly did not learn how to dance in music school. I don't imagine my teachers were explicitly white supremacist in their view of music theory.
But you want to go to Japanese music theory school? I mean, I'm sure that there's those other Japanese microtonal stuff, but the Japanese are crazy about that music. They're
tonality,
way crazier about it than we are.
Well, most of them anyway.
And I'm sure they will very openly, without even a hint of worry, call it supreme.
Again, I only said it at the beginning though, ignoring the Christian element of it all, so convenient, because when you actually kind of take that into consideration, I remember an argument between a very religious kid and my atonal theory teacher, where he was trying to explain that he believed tonality was a religious spiritual experience that came through Christianity and talked to everybody, and that's why it's special, and of course my atonal teacher just completely dismissed that. Well, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, this is a tough topic, but
sorry, it's not
through
wrong.
the years, once we discovered the major scale, I mean, look at all the problems with the major scale. Seems to be perfect. The minor scale is not perfect. There's 3 variations of it. You got to use leading tones. You got to alter the 5 chord to make it work. You know what I mean? The major key seems to be the one collection of sounds that we picked out that works perfectly. The rest is crazy and hard to account for, but it's there. He's claiming that major scale infringes upon everything, when really it kind of completes everything. You know what I mean? All this other stuff came until there's this major scale, and then once humans discovered it, we used it a lot. Okay. I mean, it took a long time to discover, thousands of years.
Yeah.
And guess what? Even when you get to the root of it, most pop songs and rock songs are in a major key, not a minor key.
Yeah.
And if you really look at it, all minor keys are just they're just the minor expression of their major counterpart. C major and A minor really are the same key.
Well, there's a thing that's going to happen, that if we're lucky enough and don't kill ourselves enough and don't blow up this planet enough, if we're around for another 1,000 years and this stuff starts to really stretch out, Beethoven and Mozart are still going to be remembered, and they're still going to be thought of as some of the first people to put together some of these ideas, Bach as well.
Yeah,
and some of these other things in between, these past 100 years, 150 years, are going to spread thin, and only certain names are going to be remembered out of the whole entire thing of it. And most of this is going to fall away, but the music theory is going to still be there.
Yeah, I'll give it to Adam Neely, and I'll give it to many YouTube creators. I've been shocked and been elated at the young group of people that are obsessed with classical music. I was the weirdo in high school who used to draw to Mozart, and I was listening to Beethoven driving down the road in my CD player at the age of 16 and 17. So to see that there's a bunch of people that still, cherish it is good. And I would, he says he's part of the Bach gang. I wouldn't doubt that Neely deep down really appreciates, more than he's letting on here, the 18th century practice of music. He's dismissing it like it's not a special moment in time.
Yeah.
Mean that the system itself that they had to work with wasn't structurally biased towards the harmonic style of 18th century European musicians. And that's what
it's going to still be for a long time.
Makes racism structural.
And it's not because of racism. And it's not that is a backwards thing. It's the music that makes it. The music is what makes it supreme. The discovery of those music, those concepts and those ideas is what makes it supreme, not the white supremacy of it, not the cultural angle of it. It is discovering these tonality things that are going to be useful for thousands of years to come if we survive long enough.
Oh yeah, I would say until the 20th century, atonal music and Schoenberg, when the theorists really took off, late 19th century and stuff, might be the first time that composers, atonal music, for example, Schoenberg purposely taking away tonality. It's the first time constructing music through theory first. You know what I mean? If that kind of makes sense. I've wondered about that. Like, atonality didn't come first. Atonality was thought of and then put into practice, whereas tonality came and then was announced. And then, the way I kind of view it anyway.
Sorry to bring in the critical race theory, by the way. I know if you're watching this now, you might be on some kind of future blacklist for anti-American activities, but here we are, everybody. Institutional racism.
Again, I really don't like that Adam Neely dismisses critical race theory as the thing that is put down because it's the right thing that should be taught, but it's just, that's dangerous, Adam.
Yeah, and it was also a bunch of bull crap. I mean, it's him. If he wants to say that the right wing represents, like they say that this guy wanted to cancel Schenker, and I never said I wanted to cancel Schenker. You saying getting put on a blacklist for talking about critical race theory is doing the same thing. You're a hypocrite right there, because that was never part of the deal with any of that.
Theory plays a part of it. Here is me eating Fritos.
No, I'm not listening to that. Let me see.
Was that the end of it?
That's the end of that. I'm not listening to no Fritos. Let's see here. I don't know how much of this I want to listen to. But I remember I shared it with you, saying maybe we could loop it together. But we're running long. We've got to wrap up. Your wife's coming in 10 minutes.
We're wrapping up here in a minute, and I'd like to,
I don't remember what this is too long of a video, but
I would like to overall say, though,
trying to convince you.
Adam Neely did do a pretty good job he points out that there's a ton of collective theories.
Really interesting music. Yeah.
And it's true in a sense that why is it shocking that we in the West focus on our language to express it? But where it falls apart is he has to say music's not a universal for it to work, but the fact that he clearly showed two cultures discovering the same thing, sort of shoots that argument in the foot.
So I don't think we're going to have time to go through this, but this is a good podcast by the podcast, The Lotus Leaders of Musical Theory is Not Racist. And they showed the stuff that exact class that Adam Neely gave that he didn't invent. Those types of things are being made mandatory in over 200 different college universities. And that there's been, I couldn't even list them out here because I save them. I see them on my phone. I see them happen on Twitter, but all sorts of different professors.
Well, let me watch this video and we'll do a second video. How are we doing on time?
Well, it's just you got to go in 10 minutes.
No, I know. I'm being picked up.
The time's like 3 hours, 30 minutes.
Oh, we've been doing 3 hours? Yeah.
3:30.
And how many people are probably not going to hear all of this?
I don't know. It depends on who.
Oh, jeez. But that's the point, though, is there's a lot of this going on. It's a cancer from within. It's Western culture eating itself.
Yeah. Well, there's part of it that there's the grift of guys like that professor who knows that they can make themselves more important when they're not that important. They're just a random music professor. But by being the person who leads the charge of pushing in critical race theory, part of the whole idea of critical race theory is you have to have the critical consciousness, the race consciousness I. And so you need somebody who's there to teach you and train you and show you all the ways that you didn't see before that this stuff was actually critical race theory.
That's why I wonder if Neely truly has to believe part of it, because
when they start believing it, all it is one gigantic reification fallacy. It's just, let's make sure that everything that we can think of or
can be viewed through the lens,
push it into that.
Yeah, but what I mean by he has to truly believe it, because making music for people who are creative is the fun part. Making money is the hard part. Now, I'm not saying Adam Neely hasn't made money with his music, but I bet he's making more money talking about music than making
his YouTube videos.
Yeah. And good for him. But you're going to have to really believe that agenda, because I've thought about all the ways I could make money in music, and being disingenuous like that and trying to find an angle that hasn't been done just to get published or make money isn't trying to do anything better for music.
No. It's just like I said, even with those critical race theorists, it's all kind of like an idea of how to create like a commissar class. It's how to. If you go to any sort of university, you can see they've now got all these diversity or what do they even call it? Diversity and inclusion.
Oh,
yeah, but they're administrators. They have these like administrators that each university spends tens of millions of dollars on just the administrators every single year. Yeah. And this sort of guy is able to look at it too and carve himself out a spot in the American talking points if he implements the critical race theory. And then if you go into any field, anywhere, like I said, there's the physics one.
What's his face say? He said, these people who've put all of their careers in Schenkerian analysis don't want their work to be stripped away. And well, it's the same with all of these things, right? Like when you create all those pointless jobs, well, now you got someone with a job for 20 years as a DIE administrator.
Yeah, so it's all about like this factory. James Lindsay says the main point of critical race theorists is create more critical race theorists, but at the same time too is to create positions. Like the diversity and inclusion stuff is to create this almost kind of bureaucratic class of overseers who need to be implemented into every college, every university, everything. That's ultimately what Ibram X. Kendi's idea is, to put this amendment in the United States of America that says that they have to oversee and approve.
We used to talk a lot when I was in college, if you remember, and I always would describe the feeling there as this icky feeling.
Yeah.
And I think that it was all of this stuff creeping in.
Look at this. Whiteness as dominance. This is a paper released in the National Science Foundation journal, and they also were given like a grant of $500,000. Says what the professors advertised to the National Sciences Foundation. It's a little hard to read because this is blurry. So explore to the extent of which education, strategies, tools, and materials in undergraduate physics classrooms and laboratory sessions center some students and marginalize others. The project will identify teaching strategies, tools, materials. So they come in and they say, we're going to do this thing. We're going to evaluate the race situation. They don't have to say the race situation. They're going to come in with all these like evaluative works. They usually kind of go into something like, we need to focus on the sociology of physics.
Yeah,
we need to focus on the sociology of bridge building. We need to focus on the sociology of architecture.
Listening to conversations.
And so then once they get in with this, what the professors delivered after receiving their $500,000 grant, observing whiteness in introductory physics, a case study.
See,
within whiteness, the organizations they pulled, what do we call it again? The modulation. They pulled the modulation on them. These are all go get in with this thing and then pull the modulation on them. They get these grants. That same guy, that same professor is going to get all sorts of bullshit grants to do some sort of music or sort of.
I mean,
the organization, let's see, within whiteness, the organization of social life, this is in physics, National Foundation of Science. This is about physics. Within whiteness, the organization of social life is in terms of a center of margins that are based on dominance, control, and transcendent figure, and is consistently structurally ascribed value over the and above other figures. In this paper, we synthesize literature from critical whiteness studies and critical race theory to articulate analytic markers for whiteness and use the markers to identify and analyze whiteness as it shows up in introductory physics classroom interaction.
Yeah.
This is a common tactic. This is a common tactic in social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion. Sell you on a soft version, deliver it to you, do the modulation, and then out comes the hard version. Example, critical race theory, soft version. We're just teaching the honest history of slavery and racism. The hard version. Capitalism equals racism. Kendi, how to be an anti-racist. Whites are all complicit in the system of white supremacy. D'Angelo, whiteness is our dominant culture and a means of oppression. Delgado, all racial disparities caused by racism. The only solution to past discrimination is present discrimination. Whites are complicit in the sins of their ancestors.
It's infiltrated music. It's infiltrated every nerdy thing I've loved. I mean, to be honest, I would consider myself a music geek or nerd more than anything. I also like Dungeons and Dragons. It's come for that. Magic the Gathering. It's come for that. It's everywhere now.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of those things that I already got into long before, but if there's not, like, they're trying to move into the STEM stuff. They said for a while STEM was largely safe. The humanities got taken over forever ago. Law got taken forever ago. Everything's just, as James Lindsay pointed out, they call themselves a virus. It's evangelical. It moves into everything. It has a way to move into everything. I'm calling something like the sociology of music, and then they go in, and the next thing you know, they're just completely talking this crap. And then they say, well, James Lindsay says, call stuff racist until you own it. That guy wants to call musical theory racist until he owns it. He wants to, it honestly is like a power play. And that's one of the things, like the postmodern angle of all this sorts of stuff. They think everything's power and there can only be power. So if people think like that in the world, how are they thinking that they're interacting with you? Like, we can be gregarious and say, hey, we're open to all that stuff. We're open to all sorts of things. We're not into the power. We're into the merit. We're into the beauty. We're into the what's awesome. And it doesn't matter. They're not playing that game. They're playing the power game. They're claiming we're playing the power game. They project that, but they're playing the power game.
Yeah,
They're saying we want to take it and move over. Like, you got to listen to them and how they think the world is. Well, that's how they're approaching the world themselves.
And I think the sad part is that people like Bach and Beethoven and Mozart, they made statements that took years to write and decades, and then they just put it out in the world. And it's pretty miraculous what they did. I don't understand the attack on it. There's a reason why Schenker picked those three, but hey, he just puts them up. We just think a few select musicians. Man, that's pretty crazy. Here, let's end with this. People were better at things back in the day because life was harder, not easier. The easier life gets, the more mediocrity comes in. When I was talking about the monks who would write the Bible down in the most beautiful handwriting ever, they had dedicated their life to being that good at something. Nobody to life today, with the exception of few, needs to be that good. In fact, society has made life so easy. You can get by from zero to, in American society, zero to old age, being a complete average person, which is a good thing. That I think was the American dream. How can everybody have a good life regardless of their intellect or drive or whatever? See, a lot of it, they don't talk about what the hell was the drive behind Beethoven, Bach, and Mozart, right? Personally, I think it was because they knew they were geniuses, and so they wanted to get really good at something, and they were obsessed about it.
Almost. James is gets obsessed about this stuff,
but this work that I do want to say, anybody's invited. It's at Dumkey, July 17th, 6 p.m., University of Utah.
You got a song on there?
What was that?
You got a song on there?
I do, but I'm not sharing this work with anybody yet.
Oh, okay. Well, something that you would share?
Yeah, I got something I can share.
You might have to. No, I don't think you have to log off of that thing. You can actually probably share it to the screen if you hustle. No, you don't. You can go do it.
Oh, I wonder how it's gonna sound.
So I can also, if you want, I can put the music up at the front so it starts with that.
Where?
Of this whole thing, just so it like starts out with music as like a minute or something.
All right. Well, what do I
put it? Just show it on the screen and push play.
Oh, it sounds fine. This is a piano sonata. The initial
put it up around this.
I initially started writing it when I was like 19. Then it went away and it wasn't really a proper sonata. Then I found it and realized everything I wrote could be put into an exposition properly. So last year I did that in addition to writing the development and the recapitulation.
Put it up on there.
This is also Staff Pad, by the way, gorgeous program.
Sounds all white supremacist to me.
This is the Berlin piano. I mean, this is very German.
Where's the Swarmo? Oh, that's cool. That sounds all Russian, so it's probably cool feminist.
Yeah, I wrote this part in particular when I was obsessed with Rachmaninoff.
No, wrong. wrong. Just kidding.
Yeah, we're in 12/8 there now. It's just back then I used to just always change meters without knowing.
How old were you when you did this?
This exposition part, I was 19. The development was last year when I was 41. This whole part I had to basically restructure and take some things out from my original piece. But this part would be considered, it was actually 18. This would probably be the third thing I ever wrote. Anyways, here, so I should get going.
How long does this have?
6 minutes total.
That sounds like an end. That sounded like an end.
That was the end of the exposition. Now we're in the development.
Stop it?
Yeah, because the development's cool. I'll give you a little piece of the development here.
Well, I mean, if anybody listens to it and wants some of James's music or ideas or thoughts, or James meets with a lot of composer friends as well, and they're always BS.
We'll end right here.
Supremacist.
Anyway, but yeah, so please come to the string quartet. If
July 17th.
July 17th.
At the University of Utah?
University of Utah, Dumpke. It's 4th floor, only 114 people. I'm sending out personal invitations. So, but
Right.
anyway, it was really good to be on here.
I'm not participating in that white supremacy. All right. Thank you, Jimmy DeMarino.